Chapter 8:12. In order to match the weight of the bow, the custom-made wooden arrows were thicker and heavier than ordinary aluminum arrows. Rhodey was very satisfied with this. Although it was simple and crude compared to the powerful bows that weighed more than 300 pounds in the later stages of the game, on Earth, the destructive power of this type of bow could easily pierce through leather armor at close range. He checked the attributes out of habit and was speechless. After entering the space-time prison, Roddy could no longer see any system notifications. He put down the bow and nodded. How much? Including the arrows. It's fate that I can use this bow. I really didn't see it earlier. Little brother, you're really good at shooting. The original price was 8,600 yuan. I was selling it for 6,000 yuan, but now I'm selling it to you for 5,000 yuan along with 12 wooden arrows and a thumb ring. The boss was full of excuses, but Roddy was too lazy to bargain. He took out a stack of RMB from his pocket and pushed it over. Then he looked around. Other than the bow and arrow equipment, the hunter's hut also had various survival tools and some self-defense weapons. Roddy pointed at a few items and packed them up. After spending more than 8,000 yuan, he unstrung the bow and limped back to the car like he was carrying a shoulder pole. His hip bone was still swollen. He couldn't walk normally no matter how hard he tried. But after sitting in the Camry, his expression turned serious. The preparation is almost done. Then we'll do as you say. Kardashian crossed her fingers and pulled on her ligament. The joints made a cracking sound as they rubbed against each other. She was wearing a black Dennis motorcycle riding suit with fluorescent stripe. The leather suit, which cost more than 4,000 renminbi, was made from Italy. The arms, shoulders, chest and back of the suit were protected by titanium alloy or polymeric material. Beside her was a pair of black and white cycling gloves. When riding a motorcycle, it could be used as a very good protection if the motorcycle fell down. But at this time, it had become a light armor in the city. It was enough to defend against most cold weapons. Roddy handed over a domestic telescopic stick. The clock showed that it was 3:30 in the afternoon. He glanced at the rearview mirror and drove the Camry toward the 13 tombs. The 3 cars tailing them clearly did not realize what Roddy had prepared. They did not even recognize that the wooden stick Roddy was carrying was a bow. The gang members in the car were chatting through the walkie-talkie, talking about the glorious deeds they had done in the past. No one took the young man and woman in the Camry seriously. They followed Roddy all the way back and forth in the city of Chongping, but as they walked, they realized that he had turned onto the road leading to the 13 tombs. At this time, the sun had already begun to shine. The people who originally had their windows open after entering the mountainous area were immediately hit by the chilly wind. One by one, they closed their windows. This place is full of inchi. TSK, it's at least 5 or 6 degrees lower than in the city. Aluo, who was wearing a t-shirt, sighed, but Li Nan, who was next to him, interrupted, "Once we enter the mountains, it'll be easy for them to find us. There are almost no cars on this road, and we'll be suspicious if we keep following them." "So what if they found out? Is he so awesome that he drove down the cliff?" The fierce-looking Brother 11 said disdainfully, "You're afraid of being found out when you secretly take pictures, but that's because you're afraid that they'll give you trouble. Now we have 3 cars and a dozen people, and that kid in front has no power or influence. Who do you think will cause trouble?" The 13 tombs were the mausoleums of the Ming Dynasty emperors. They were located to the north of Chongping, next to the 13 Tombs Reservoir. The temperature in the mountainous area in March was not high. As far as the eye could see, there was still a sense of desolation from winter. Although this place was a scenic spot, there were basically no cars here unless it was a holiday. The winding mountain road looked very boring, but after walking for a while, even a fool could see that the 3 cars behind them were up to no good. Sure enough, the Camry suddenly sped up as it drove. Li Nan's expression tightened. "They found us. So what? This place is in the middle of nowhere. Does he think he can run away with a Camry? Aluo picked up the walkie-talkie with a playful expression. The target is running, don't lose him. He can't get away, unless he drives into the reservoir himself. Laughter could be heard coming from the other end of the walkie-talkie. However, Li Nan and Gung Qing, who were sitting in the back, could feel the acceleration of the car. The Camry in front of them tilted to one side as it turned the corner. It was obvious that it was trying to escape. But there were 3 cars behind, a Passat and a Mercedes GLE 400h and an Audi A6L. In terms of power, it was much stronger than a Camry. The uphill of the mountain road was also a place where torque was very important. It was futile for Roddy to step on the accelerator. No one in the real world could transform into Takumi Fujiwara within a second. Roddy hadn't driven a car for many years, and the sound of the tires turning at high speeds proved that the car wasn't made for corners. However, this was enough. Roddy's eyes became colder and colder. Listening to the 2.0L engine, he glanced at the signal bar on the screen of the car's computer. He suddenly changed directions and turned into a village road that had yet to be paved with asphalt. Huala huala sounds instantly spread throughout the carriage, mixed with the crisp sound of pebbles bouncing on the chassis. This small road was probably built by some villagers in the mountainous area. On normal days, a tractor could be used. The 3-compartment car was so bumpy that it felt like it was going to fall apart. Roddy looked around and suddenly said, "This way." Then, he stepped on the brakes and stopped the car. The narrow dirt road was only wide enough for one car to pass. On the left was a mountain wall full of grass and trees, and on the right was a sloping cliff. At this time, they were halfway up Mount Tianshou, which was about 300 meters above sea level, so the bottom of the cliff looked quite high. As soon as the car stopped, the 3 cars behind it had to stop as well. However, the Camry stirred up a lot of dust. When the 3 cars came over, they could only vaguely see Roddy opening the car door and limping away into the distance. "Hey, this kid is so mean. He left a beautiful woman behind and ran away. TSK. Brother 11's Passat was at the forefront. He parked the car directly behind the Camry, pressed the electronic handbrake, pushed the door open, and got out of the car. As the dust gradually dispersed, he looked into the distance and found that Roddy had already run away. He was even more amused. Walking around the front of the Camry to the right side, he bent down with a ruffian face and shouted at Kardashian in the car, "Beauty! Your little lover left you behind and ran away. You need my help, bang!" Because he was too close to the car door, Brother 11 was slammed on the head before he could finish his words. The force was so strong that even the glass of the car door cracked, and Brother 11 rolled down the slope without a sound. Kardashian got out of the car in her riding clothes, pressed the button of the telescopic stick with her right hand, and walked toward the passenger seat of the Passat. "Damn, what is she doing? Get the weapons! Hurry up and get the weapons out!" Aluo, who was in the passenger seat, suddenly shouted into the walkie-talkie. However, before he could open the door, the stick smashed the glass of the side door. Fortunately, the glass of the Passat was explosion-proof. Only a small hole appeared on the part of the glass that was smashed. Under the spider web-like cracks, the whole glass was intact. However, it couldn't withstand Kardashian's fist. She was also wearing Nox riding gloves, and her knuckles were also protected by titanium alloy. With a swing of her seemingly delicate arm, she smashed through the glass on the spot. Her fist landed on Aluo's face, and he immediately fainted. The car was splattered with blood, but no one knew whether it was from the glass or the fist. Li Nan and Gung Qing, who were sitting in the back, holding their cameras, were dumbfounded. They originally thought it was a bully molesting a girl plot, but they didn't expect this girl to be so murderous. Coupled with the round titanium alloy shoulder pads, she was no different from a secret agent killer in a movie. The people in the 2 cars behind heard Aluo's yell and began to move. All 4 doors of the Mercedes-Benz GLE opened, and 5 people suddenly rushed out. Usually, they had all kinds of weapons under their feet, and this time, they casually pulled out all kinds of weapons, which was quite intimidating. Plus the 3 people who got out of the A6L, 9 gangsters with green skin and gold chains, holding watermelon knives and baseball bats in their hand. Yo! A beauty even learned how to use a stick? You? Because the road was narrow, the group of people who got out of the car had no way to surround her. They stepped on the dirt road, which was no more than 30 to 40 centimeters wide, and walked forward from both sides of the car. The skinny man who was at the front was about to tease her, but his words were stopped when he saw the 2 dragon horns on top of Kardashian's head. Her frosty expression was full of killing intent, which inexplicably made his legs a little weak. It was just a moment of daze, and the thin stick had already swung towards him. He was just a gangster who followed around everywhere, and he only knew how to fight on the street. In front of Kardashian, who had maxed out cold weapon fighting skills, he was completely useless. As soon as he lifted the baseball bat in his hand, Kardashian changed the direction of the bat and accurately hit the man's wrist. Pop! The baseball bat fell on the spot, but Kardashian reached out and grabbed the middle of it. At this time, she had already realized that the group of people in front of her were not the strong bodyguards from yesterday, but she still did not show any mercy. She lifted her leg and kicked the man in the stomach. The skinny man directly flew backward, and directly knocked down his companions who were rushing over behind him. Tough guy. Be careful. After all, the people who could carry weapons in the car were not ordinary gangsters. The 2 strong men in the last car were obviously experienced in battle. Seeing the situation, they immediately shouted, and then immediately urged the people next to them to outflank them from the other side. As a result, before the guy with a watermelon knife and beer belly rushed to the side of Kardashian, his body suddenly shook, and then he uncontrollably screamed. Chapter 8:13. Everyone turned around and saw an arrow of astonishing length pierced through the guy's right shoulder. This group of people usually wore short clothes in order to show off their tattoos. In front of the arrow, it was no different from being naked. Therefore, this arrow actually pierced through his shoulder, and the arrowhead could be seen coming out from his back. It wasn't that these thugs in the capital had never seen blood, but there weren't many battles in the past. Even if there were, it was in close combat, and it was a competition of courage. If this level was in ancient times, to put it bluntly, it wouldn't even be considered as a jianghu martial art, let alone a strong crossbow that was only used in military formations. Seeing the screaming guy oozing blood, the few people behind were stunned, and inexplicably felt their legs go soft. Looking into the distance, they saw a shadow coming towards them. Ah! Clang! Another person was shot in the shoulder, and the steel knife that he couldn't hold fell to the ground. On the other side, Kardashian waved the baseball bat to knock out the people in front of her, and rushed towards the big men behind. This scene made the group of strong men a little confused. How could a woman dare to rush forward head-on? And wasn't she afraid that the arrow behind her would hit her? However, Kardashian really didn't seem to worry about the arrow behind her. The baseball bat that she snatched was hollow, and the weight was not at all suitable for her. She only knocked out one person, and then changed the way she used it, from smashing to stabbing. In this way, those guys who used weapons without any technique really had no resistance. Even if 2 or 3 people surrounded her at the same time, she could still easily knock them away. Most of the real cold weapons battles ended in one round, and the scenes of fighting for a long time like in the movies were really rare. Kardashian's baseball bat either stabbed the face or the neck, and every hit was enough to make people instantly lose their fighting power. Even if a fat man of more than 200 pounds shouted and rushed over, it was of no use. Roddy's arrows hit them one by one, and screams resounded through the wilderness. The 2 guys at the back who thought they were good at martial arts were already frightened by this scene. No matter how powerful they They were only powerful against ordinary people. They had never seen such a master with long-range support. In ancient times, sharpshooter was also a very demoralizing existence of the enemy, not to mention this kind of gangster without cohesion. At the moment, except for the 4 paparazzi who didn't get down from the 3 cars, the remaining 9 people who could fight had already fallen, and the surrounding people were howling like pigs being slaughtered. They thought they were ruthless enough, but they didn't expect to encounter such a thing while surrounding 2 harmless people in the wilderness. It was not that no one was able to put up an effective resistance. A guy got up and swung a steel rod at Kardashian while she was attacking others. Kardashian easily blocked it with her hand. Although the armor under the riding suit was light, it was made of extremely strong composite materials. It also had a sponge lining, so the steel rod could not do anything to it. Without waiting for her to step forward, an arrow flew directly from her side and nailed the guy's collarbone on the spot, causing him to cry out and roll on the ground in pain. Normally, when a third of the army was killed, they would basically be routed and defeated. The last 2 big brothers didn't run away completely because Roddy and Kardashian's ruthlessness was too fierce, and they couldn't react at all. When the arrow hit the shoulder of the 4th person, the 2 of them no longer thought about fighting fiercely, turned around and prepared to escape in the A6. How were they honest otakus living in Zongwankan? No one would doubt that they were soldiers fighting at the border every day. But it was easy to come, but how could it be so easy to escape? The baseball bat in Kardashian's hand stabbed into the abdomen of the last person, who clenched his teeth and waved the watermelon knife in his hand, but was firmly blocked by the retracted bat. The black riding gloves directly hit the opponent's chin, and directly hit the fat man who was almost 200 pounds lying in front of the car. The back of his head hit the hood with a bang, and then he collapsed like a pile of mud. When Kardashian looked up again, the 2 guys who were trying to open the car door each had an arrow stuck in their forearms, and their faces were pale as they prepared to open the door with another hand. As a result, another arrow flew straight at the connection of the door handle that had just been pulled open. The guy who was anxious to get into the car loosened his grip and looked down, only to find that the handle had been pulled down by him because the arrow had hit it. Was she an archer or a sniper? This absurd thought flashed through his mind, and when he turned his head, he saw Kardashian walking towards him with a poker face, swinging the baseball bat at him, and his consciousness fell into darkness. After the last gangster fainted, the paparazzi, who had not come out of the 3 cars, were now as quiet as cicadas in winter. Li Nan and Gung Qing were even shivering behind the car's glass. They had thought that there would be a conflict, but they thought that it would only be a group of people bullying the young man and woman. Who would have thought that the beautiful woman outside would turn into a demon? They could clearly hear the sound of the baseball bat smashing into bones from inside the car. If they were to face this group of strong men, their only thought was to run away, but she faced a group of people with steel knives and iron bats without batting an eyelid. She smashed them all the way, as if it was as easy as harvesting a banker. Coupled with the unpredictable and frighteningly accurate arrows, although the scene was not as flashy as in the movies, it was 100 times more bloody than those deceiving things on the screen. "Come out." Kardashian spoke in perfect Chinese, and the cameramen in the 2 cars in front could not withstand the pressure at all, and they crawled out shakily. The little female dragon in front of them was holding a baseball bat, and blood was dripping down the top of the bat to the ground. Her cold eyes were like an executioner preparing to carry out an execution, causing the 2 paparazzi to subconsciously raise their hands above their heads, mimicking the surrender posture of prisoners of war, and squatting on the ground. "And you guys?" Looking over, Li Nan and Gung Qing felt their scalps go numb. The latter took out his watch and wanted to make a call, but found that there was no service here. The 13 Mausoleum was on the edge of Chongping City, but there were indeed some parts of the road in the mountains where there was no signal. He did not expect to encounter such a situation, but he did not know that it was precisely because of this that Roddy chose to make a move here. The call for help was fruitless. The two of them were hesitating whether they should go out or not. In the end, an arrow was shot through the windshield. In the middle of the spiderweb-like cracks, the black arrowhead stopped not far from the two's eyes. The warning could not be more obvious. They lived in a society ruled by law, and they did not know why they suddenly encountered such a situation. But the situation was stronger than they were, so they obediently moved out of the car, raised their hands, and squatted down. Kardashian stood in the narrow space and stared at the four people. The gangster next to her, who was screaming in pain, did not dare to do anything. At this time, there were a total of 4 people awake, and they were all rolling in pain after being shot by Roddy. In less than 2 minutes, Roddy, who had slipped down the slope, limped over. At this time, the way Roddy looked at these people was no different from the way he looked at the private soldiers of the nobles with evil intentions. He looked around, walked to the cliff, and glanced at Brother 11, who had rolled down first. After confirming that he was still unconscious, he turned to look at the paparazzi, who did not dare to move. He had already recognized Li Nan and Gung Qing. After all, he had knocked them out yesterday, and it was easy to guess that they were taking the opportunity to take revenge. As a civilian, there was nothing they could do when they encountered these people who were protected by the underworld. This was because those who dared to drive in Beijing with a bunch of controlled weapons were not stupid. Without the protection of a department-level leader, they would not be able to say that they were in the underworld. Therefore, when they encountered such people, unless they were related to the emperor, it was basically useless to call the police. But Roddy no longer saw himself as a member of this society. From the moment he shot an arrow, he knew that he could never return to his home in Zhongguancun. But so what? It was all an illusion anyway. Roddy walked to the side of the few tattooed gangsters with beer bellies. They were obviously scared out of their wit. At this moment, they did not dare to resist at all. They kept begging for mercy. Roddy ignored them and observed the power of the arrows. The arrows provided by the hunter's hut were all target arrowhead. These arrowheads were basically cones, so they were not very lethal. If they were hunting arrowheads that could bleed, it would be normal for a few people to die today. But at this time, the group of people who were screaming in pain did not bleed much. As long as they did not pull out the arrowheads themselves to bleed, they would be fine. After confirming this, Roddy said, "Sister, help me keep an eye on them. If anyone moves, teach them a lesson. I will ask the people behind them one by one." Kardashian nodded and did not say anything. On the other hand, Roddy picked up a watermelon knife and pointed at an unfamiliar paparazzi. "You, come here." He brought the person to a slope 30 meters away for a one-on-one interrogation. This was to prevent them from colluding with each other or confessing incorrectly. At this time, although Roddy was limping, no one thought that the young man in front of them would be merciful. He coldly placed the knife on the person's neck. That kind of unhurried tone was unbearable for anyone. "I'll ask you who sent you. Tell me everything you know. If there is anything different, I have a way to make you bleed for a night before you die." They were all out to make a living. Who would have thought that they would suddenly encounter such a character? Roddy's behavior was similar to that of a psychopathic murderer in the movies. He did not seem to be excited at all. Big brother, I will speak, who had experienced real interrogation in this day and age. Roddy only said a few words to scare the person. The knife on the person's neck did not even move, but the person spilled out all the information he should know. Chapter 8:14. The bug in the signal in the previous chapter has been fixed. I was distracted when I was editing the chapter yesterday. ********************* Roddy couldn't think of a reason why the paparazzi's photo target changed from Kardashian to the two of them. However, knowing this information was also a gain. He asked the guy to go back and get another accomplice to come over and verify the confession. However, one of the paparazzi who was further away from Kardashian seemed to think that this was an opportunity. He got up and wanted to run away. But before Roddy could raise his bow, Kardashian swung the baseball bat and directly smashed the man to the ground. She walked over with a gloomy face, grabbed the back of the man's neck, and dragged him back like a dead dog. The guy shouted for help and struggled desperately. When Kardashian walked to the side of the Audi A6L, her expression became irritated. She simply pulled the man up and slammed his head on the car door. With a bang, a dent was formed in the sheet metal. The fainted guy was thrown away by Kardashian like throwing garbage. Her cold eyes swept over them, and the guys who were still screaming in pain suddenly shut their mouths. They didn't think that their heads were harder than the door of the Audi A6. The contrast between the impression that Kardashian gave people was too strong. Such a slim beauty just now easily dragged a man who weighed more than 100 kilograms with one hand. Was she still human? With this scene, the rest of the people didn't dare to make any more waves. Roddy briefly questioned the paparazzi and the remaining sober ones. After confirming that there was no fabricated news, he stopped the interrogation. But this didn't mean that he would leave immediately. Limping, Roddy used a knife to puncture all the tires of these cars. However, the Mercedes-Benz was equipped with anti-puncture tires, so it didn't have any effect. He then found a pair of pliers from the back of the car and cut the wires in the engine compartments of these 3 cars by more than half. By the time they were done, the sky was almost dark. When Brother 11 woke up, he was pointed at by Roddy with his bow and climbed up obediently. Just as he was about to say something, Kardashian knocked him out with a blow from the stick. None of the people behind him ran away and were knocked out one by one. For a moment there was a lot of banging sound. Kardashian's understanding of the human body was better than Roddy's. These people were knocked out for at least 4 to 5 hours. Including the time it would take them to get out of here, it would take at least 7 to 8 hours. Roddy did not have to worry about the other party contacting the big boss. He had already destroyed all the communication equipment, even the walkie-talkie was smashed to pieces. After everything was packed up, Roddy took out all the cash and cards they had and lit them up on the spot. This was also to prevent them from running onto the road and using money to stop a car. Before leaving, Roddy glanced at the injuries of the people who were shot. After some thought, he threw a roll of bandages on them before leaving. He was not pitying this group of people, but he did not want to cause the other party to pursue and seek revenge even more crazily after killing them. There were some things that the other party would be afraid of if you knew the limit. If you used too much force, it might lead to completely different consequences. After everything was done, Roddy and Kardashian got back into the car. The Camry wobbled on the bumpy road into the village, and then returned to the asphalt road from the other side of the village. "Sister, your arm was hit. Does it still hurt?" Without the group of bastards, Roddy's tone was much more normal. Seeing that he was no longer affected by the time and space prison, Kardashian was in a good mood. She lowered her head and held the guard of Dennis' leather coat. "I don't feel anything. This thing is really strong and not heavy. You have a lot of ideas. I thought you couldn't buy armor in a place without war. In fact, many people on the internet have a kind of paranoia, as if the Earth will experience a big change in the next second, either a zombie virus or a global nuclear war. Their goal is to survive in the background of the apocalypse, and every day they discuss how to arm themselves. I read a lot of posts out of curiosity, so I know a little." While Roddy was talking, he suddenly smelled a fragrance. He turned his head and found Kardashian holding the back of the chair with both hands to his cheek, curiously looking at the mountain road illuminated by the street lamp. "Where are we going now? This seems to be the way we came here. There are surveillance cameras here. If those guys call the police, our car will be the first to be locked, so we have to go back and change transportation." "So troublesome?" Kardashian curled her lips. "I thought we could go home now. We can't go home, so I bought a tent and a sleeping bag. I guess we will sleep in the mountain tonight. This made Kardashian raise her eyebrows. Sleeping in a tent? It sounds interesting. Oh, is this tent different from the one I have seen? She thought about how to phrase it and pretended to ask casually. Roddy looked at the road ahead and didn't think much at all. He answered, I bought two. You will know when you see it. Specifically, forget it, I don't want to know. Kardashian leaned back and pouted inexplicably. As for why she suddenly became a little angry, she thought for a long time and found an excuse for herself. If we sleep in the same tent at night, it will be easy for me to bully him, but he didn't give me a chance. Damn it. Roddy didn't understand why she was suddenly in a bad mood. He couldn't look back when he was driving, and he couldn't see her face clearly in the rearview mirror because of the dim light. In the end, he had to try to change the topic. However, Kardashian seemed to deliberately lose her temper and snorted. I'm hungry. I want to eat. We don't have much time, so we can't stop to eat. But there are fast food I bought in the pocket next to me. Sister, if you are hungry, have a bite first. I will eat later. This answer made her tense expression soften again. Roddy glanced at the map and was turning the direction. Suddenly, a biscuit was stuffed into his mouth. Here, open your mouth. Roddy was stunned for a moment, but then he didn't think much about it. He took the biscuit with his mouth and ate it. However, Kardashian had never fed anyone in her life. This seemingly casual action made a strange electric current pass through her heart. Somehow, a smile appeared on her face. Roddy just caught a glimpse of her expression when he looked at the rearview mirror. He thought that she had this expression because she thought the biscuit was delicious, so he said, Sister, I especially liked this sandwich biscuit when I was a child. If you like it, I will buy more later. I don't like biscuit, Kardashian complained in her heart, and then realized what the thought that flashed through her mind was. She suddenly panicked, but she didn't show weakness on her face. I didn't say it was delicious. I almost choked. Well, I will buy something else later. Roddy helplessly smiled bitterly. He didn't know that Kardashian was trying to change the topic. However, she did not show any weakness. Instead, she fed Roddy as if she was addicted to it. Roddy choked on a few pieces until he could not speak. Because of this, she had no choice but to open a bottle of mineral water for Roddy. Looking at Roddy choking with his eyes wide open, she could not stop laughing in the back row. The car drove back to Chongping City. When Roddy parked the car, Kardashian looked outside through the window and found that it was the Wind Speed motorcycle shop. Roddy opened the door and got off the car. He whispered, Wait for me. Then he trotted to the door of the car shop. It was already 7 o'clock in the evening. If he hadn't left a deposit and asked the boss to wait for him, the shop would have been closed. The parts you want are ready. 3 boxes of Givey. The speed is guaranteed to be stable within 150 kilometers per hour. The car is over there. The boss of the Wind Speed motorcycle shop handed over the key. He was young, looking less than 40 years old. He was also a famous street racer when he was young. Because he had a lot of connections, he started a car shop when he was older. Motorcycles had high tariffs in China. The price of smuggled goods was usually more than 50% cheaper than the same model in the specialty shop. Honda, BMW, Kawasaki, Ducati, and other 4S specialty shops naturally wouldn't sell smuggled cars. However, Wind Speed was a car shop in the corner of Chongping. No one would care if they sold water bikes. What Roddy bought was this kind of smuggled goods. This time, Roddy brought all his savings with him. He also withdrew 50,000 yuan from the ATM. Buying a legal motorcycle shouldn't be a problem. However, it was an emergency. If he wanted to buy a legal motorcycle, he would have to wait for 3 days to get the license. Even if it was a second-hand product, he would have to wait for the transfer. It would be very troublesome. However, water bikes didn't have to wait. As long as they were smuggled, they wouldn't have a legal license. They were all vehicles with fake licenses. They could be bought and driven at will. When Roddy came here in the afternoon, he seemed to buy riding clothes and oil to disguise himself. In fact, he ordered a smuggled Honda CRF 1000L African twin humps off-road motorcycle. He didn't know much about motorcycles. He bought it because there was one in stock in the shop. Roddy didn't know how to ride and had never ridden a motorcycle before. However, it didn't prevent him from knowing the general performance of these motorcycles. Anyone who had ridden a motorcycle would know that riding a motorcycle and riding a bicycle were not on the same level. Stepping on the accelerator, braking, clutch, and shifting gears were not easy to learn. But Honda, as the largest motorcycle manufacturer, had long applied the black technology of dual-clutch automatic to its flagship model. Although the car, nicknamed non-dual, was shockingly large and weighed 220 kilograms, when riding it, one only needed to turn on the accelerator, and the operation was not much different from that of an electric scooter. Roddy was naturally satisfied with this. He paid the deposit on the spot. In order to carry more luggage, he asked the boss to install the largest travel trunk in the afternoon. This way, he could ride this motorcycle on unpaved roads and perfectly avoid the road cameras with Kardashian. After all, Roddy knew very well that continuing to drive this Camry was a dead end. In most people's eyes, motorcycles were either clumsy and low like Harley-Davidson motorcycles or the streamlined and sharp Motocp super racing cars. However, the appearance of the Fei Shuang was obviously different. It looked completely like a long-legged owl. This was because the prototype of this bike was used to participate in the Dakar rally. Its long-range shock absorber determined that it was far better than a car's off-road performance. The tall windshield also prevented the rider from being blown by the wind during long-distance high-speed travel. "I've got your ID and license plate. As long as you don't get caught and sent to the vehicle management office for comparison, there won't be a problem." The boss handed over the forged vehicle registration and driver's license. Roddy flipped them open and saw that the driver's license had C1D written on it. C1 stood for an ordinary sedan, and D stood for a three-wheeled or two-wheeled motorcycle. Although this was only a small detail, without this set of ID, the gas station wouldn't refuel at all. Chapter 8:15. Before leaving, Roddy bought himself a helmet and a windproof suit. Kardashian couldn't wear a helmet because of her dragon horns, so he bought riding boots, a thick scarf, and goggles. Riding a motorcycle was not like driving a car. Ordinary clothes would be blown through by the wind. He didn't want Kardashian to suffer from a cold. Pushing the motorcycle to the side of the Camry, Roddy wanted to take Kardashian here and leave directly. However, after looking around at the busy streets and the surveillance cameras not far away, he thought for a moment, opened the door, and said to Kardashian, "Sister, you drive the car. Follow me." He thought that Kardashian would hesitate, but he didn't expect her to agree so quickly. Dragons had no problem flying a plane, let alone an automatic car. Roddy briefly explained the driving essentials and traffic regulations. Regarding such issues, he naturally didn't worry about Kardashian. He rode the motorcycle in the front, and the little female dragon followed behind. Everything was as Roddy expected. After only a few minutes, she already looked like an experienced driver. She didn't forget to turn on the turn signal even when turning a corner. They still went into the mountains, but this time, Roddy didn't go to the 13 Tombs. Instead, he went north along the G6 side road, and then turned to the direction of the White River Castle Reservoir in Yanqing. At night, there were all kinds of cinder cars driving on the mountain road. The rumbling sound lasted for more than an hour, and they finally got rid of them after leaving the mountain area. After entering the Yanqing district, there were suddenly very few people. It was normal for the wind here to be 7 or 8 degrees lower than in Zhongguancun. Even though Roddy had changed into a suit, he still felt that his hands were stiff. Fortunately, the motorcycle had an electric heating handle, so his fingers didn't completely lose feeling. He maintained a speed of 80 degrees per hour on the road, and turned into a fork on the desolate road between two villages in Yanqing. After driving for a kilometer, he directly drove to a roadless wasteland, and only stopped after driving for a few kilometers. Following behind him, Kardashian skillfully stepped on the brake, changed the gear to P, pressed the electronic handbrake, and pushed the door open. She said, "What, are we camping here?" "No, we should leave the car here and continue walking." It was already 9 o'clock in the evening, and the unlit country road was pitch black. Only the LED headlights of the Camry illuminated the smoke and dust that had yet to dissipate. Roddy opened the trunk and began to carefully check the things he had bought today. He had bought quite a lot of outdoor equipment from the Three Men outdoor store. Canteens, mini gas tanks, and small stoves were essential equipment in the wilderness. Instant noodles, compressed biscuits, and other food went without saying. Roddy did not know how long he would be staying in the wilderness this time, so he bought everything he could. However, the size of the 3 boxes added to the motorcycle could not be compared to the trunk of a car. Even the tent, inflatable mattress, sleeping bag, and other items were quickly stuffed to the brim. Roddy had no choice but to take them out and make a decision. Bring the necessary tools, water, and food for 3 days. As for the rest, just throw them away. Kardashian was also trying to come up with ideas. However, she had never seen many of the things that Roddy bought, so she had to ask him about them. Roddy patiently answered her questions. He was a little hesitant about bringing food, but Kardashian suddenly picked up a large tent. "This thing takes up too much space. Throw it away and change to something else." That's a tent, that's why it takes up space. One is enough. Bringing 2 is too much space." There was actually nothing wrong with what she said. A compressed tent was enough to store food for 2 people for several days, and 1 tent. It seemed that it was not a problem to squeeze it. After all, they would sleep in sleeping bags, and camping in the wilderness was not so particular. Roddy hesitated for a moment, but before he could say anything, he saw Kardashian had already thrown the tent back into the trunk. "What else do you want to pack?" Roddy finally chose to shut up. He didn't want to contradict Kardashian, so he didn't want to talk nonsense. He silently stuffed more rations into her mouth, then closed the Givey's box and found the windproof riding pants and boots he had just bought for Kardashian. "Sis, go to the car and change into these. It'll be very cold if you ride the motorcycle." Touching the fabric of the pants and the knee guards, Kardashian also knew that these things were necessary, so she turned around and went to the car to change. Roddy didn't have the courage to look back. He took out his watch, thought for a moment, and checked the map. After confirming that he remembered the route, he clicked on the memory format, and then waved his hand to throw it into the wasteland dozens of meters away. If something went wrong, an electronic device like the watch would definitely be the first to expose his position. Roddy looked up at the sky. Yanqing was located to the north of the mountains, completely isolated from the haze of the capital. At this moment, the stars were very clear, and even a faint Milky Way could be seen. Click. The car door opened and closed. Kardashian, who had changed into pants and boots, put on a scarf and said teasingly, "I thought you would peek." This young lady really said everything. Roddy had no choice but to surrender. "I still want to live for a few more years." His words caused a round of punches, but it didn't hurt. Roddy checked again, and after confirming that it was all right, he took the lead to kick off the footrest and get on the motorcycle. Although there were 3 boxes on the motorcycle, it didn't prevent Kardashian from sitting on the seat behind Roddy. However, the seat of the motorcycle was, after all, narrow. After she sat down, her body was inevitably pressed against Roddy's back. Although both of them were wearing riding suits with deck protection, this distance was indeed a bit ambiguous. Roddy knew that this was inevitable, so he explained, "Sister, the road may be bumpy later. It's better for you to hold my clothes with one hand and support the back with the other hand like this." Before he finished his words, Kardashian put her hands around his waist. "You talk too much. Let's go." She wrapped 2 layers of scarves to keep warm. Her eyes under the goggles were shining with a strange light. From this angle, Roddy couldn't look back. Anyway, he couldn't see her expression, so he wouldn't think much even if she strangled him like this. She didn't know whether Roddy thought much or not. He pulled down the lens of the Arai helmet, turned on the lights, pressed the start button, switched the left hand to forward gear, and slowly left the Camry's light range. The Fei Shuang motorcycle was sold for 180,000 yuan, which was enough to buy a Camry next to it. The reason why it was so expensive was that it was the flagship model of Honda off-road motorcycles. With the long travel shock absorber, Roddy didn't even feel much vibration on the gravel road when he twisted the accelerator. He easily returned to the asphalt road all the way. Roddy didn't know much about motorcycles, but at this time, he did buy the most suitable model to get rid of all tracking. The Fei Shuang had a liter displacement, so it was easy to accelerate by pushing the accelerator to 180 degrees at any time. Honda's fuel consumption was surprisingly low. After years of technological development, the fuel consumption of 100 kilometers was only a little more than 3 liters, and its fuel tank could fill up to 25 L. In other words, Roddy could drive all the way from the capital to Baotou without a problem. After throwing away the watch, Roddy no longer had any electronic aid. Nowadays, Ducati and BMW motorcycles could not wait to install 4 screens on their cars, but Honda was much simpler. The LCD screen only displayed basic information such as speed and fuel consumption. But this also saved the car's GPS from being tracked by the police. He walked on the original road for a while, and turned onto another road. The sign said the direction of Zhangjiago, but Roddy didn't follow the paved road full of large trucks. Instead, he turned into the mountains again and traveled on a small road that couldn't be found on the map. The bumpy road made Kardashian involuntarily hug Roddy. At this time, it was quiet, and the only sound that could be heard was the unique whistle of the Honda engine and the reverberation of the tires rubbing against the gravel road. If he were to take the highway, he would have to pass through the checkpoints of the special police once he left the Beijing border. However, the road that Roddy was taking was naturally left unchecked. He followed the map in his mind and drove for a while. Finally, he stopped at the side of a mountain with gentle terrain. "Let's camp here today. Let's eat something first." Roddy took off his helmet. The height of the ADV motorcycle was quite high, and it took some effort for him to get off. After getting off the motorcycle, he prepared to help the little female dragon. She seemed to be in a good mood. She stood up on the rear pedal and stretched at the starry sky above her head. "This car is quite interesting." Hey, with her slender figure standing in front of him, Roddy naturally had to admire her amazing long legs. But the next second, the motorcycle's big support on the ground slipped. Kardashian's body slanted, and she cried out and lost her balance. But she didn't panic and directly jumped to the side. Coincidentally, Roddy happened to be standing in the direction where she leapt. This time, Roddy couldn't dodge, and he didn't dare to reach out. But in the end, he was still afraid that she would hurt him, so he opened his arms and steadily caught the jumping young lady. "Sister, be careful." Kardashian felt Roddy's hands under her armpits for a moment, and then she retracted them as if she had been electrocuted. Her eyes behind the goggles smiled, but because her face was wrapped in a scarf, and Roddy didn't dare to look at her, he didn't notice it. Clang! Because she stepped on her foot when she jumped, the 500-pound motorcycle fell to the ground. Roddy hurriedly ran over to lift the bike, but he found that he couldn't move it at all. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Kardashian standing next to him looking at him playfully. "Beg me, hurry up and shout." Roddy thought to himself, isn't this your fault? Why do you want me to beg you? But the situation was stronger than he was. He smiled bitterly and said, Sister, please help me. Tisk, so obedient. Kardashian's strength was greater than Roddy's. With his help, they easily lifted the bike, and then began to rummage through the boxes to prepare for camping and eating. Roddy took out a small gas tank and a stove, put a large kettle on it, and began to boil water. Then he took out 2 boxes of instant noodles hung in a net outside the box, and asked Kardashian to open the packaging there, while he began to prepare the tent and sleeping bag. The tent was bought in a hurry, so Roddy didn't climb into it to see the space inside. Just now, when Kardashian said to throw away one, Roddy thought that the tent was not small, and it should be no problem to sleep 2 people, so he didn't raise any objection. However, at this time, after setting up the only tent, he found that this kind of outdoor tent had 2 layers. The inner layer had gauze to block mosquitoes, and the outer layer was used to block wind and humidity. When he led the army to war in the kingdom of Karen, Roddy had never lived in such a high-end thing. Everyone either slept on the ground or covered with felt to block the rain. Chapter 8:16. The water boiled. Roddy soaked the instant noodles, took out 2 ham sausages, and put them in the noodle box. He thought for a moment and asked, Sister, the tent seems to be, a little small. What should we do? Do you sleep outside or should I sleep outside? Kardashian rolled her eyes. If it was summer, Roddy could consider sleeping outside, but at this time, the temperature in the mountains was still around 0 degrees Celsius at night. The result of trying to be brave was no different from seeking death. So he silently picked up the instant noodles and began to drink the soup. Kardashian was amused by his reaction. She also picked up the fork and began to eat the noodles. She was surprised that it tasted good. The 2 of them looked at the galaxy and ate the instant noodles in the dark night. It was quite an artistic scene. However, they were ordinary people now. The riding clothes could only block the wind, and the thermal insulation was not very good. After a while, the cold mountain wind blew, and the 2 of them began to shiver. Roddy quickly rinsed his mouth with mineral water, wiped his face with a tissue, and then began to inflate the air cushion. Kardashian was curious, what is this cushion for? It's a mattress to sleep on. It's too cold to lie directly on the ground, but the air cushion can isolate heat, so it's much better to sleep on it. Roddy continued to operate according to the instructions. Anyway, I heard them say so. I don't know the specifics, but this cushion is sold for more than 1,000 yuan each. I guess it's useful. The American-made Thermarest air cushion was small, but lying on it, one could not feel the cold of the ground at all. After all this was done, Roddy magically took out an outdoor stretch thermal jacket and handed it to Kardashian. He whispered, You can't wear too thick when you sleep, so sister, you should wear this before you go into the sleeping bag. You can change in the tent. It's warmer. What about you? Kardashian looked at the other set in his hand. Roddy was a little embarrassed by the question. He scratched his head and said, I'll change outside. When Roddy got into the tent, shivering from the cold, he found that he could not see Kardashian at all. Roddy reached out to turn on the external light, only to find that Kardashian had already laid down in the sleeping bag. She was looking around with interest and kept saying, This tent is so small and light when folded. I didn't expect that no wind could get in and it's so thin. Roddy was a little nervous. After all, they were sleeping together. Even if they were in the space-time prison, it was an undeniable fact. Therefore, he answered her seriously, just like he did in class. He talked about the Gore-Tex patent and the strength of the carbon fiber pipe. After he crawled into the down sleeping bag, the 2 of them were almost arm in arm. Naturally, it was a little funny for him to answer so seriously at such a distance. But Roddy did not realize that it was not normal for Kardashian to ask so seriously. In other words, They were actually much more nervous than usual. No matter how good Kardashian's mouth was, she was still a little confused when they were side by side. The inflatable mattress was warm and comfortable, but she did not dare to move. She just stood there like a mummy. She regretted throwing away the other tent, but she comforted herself in her heart. In the wild, two people have to rely on warmth to increase their survival rate. I did nothing wrong. She did not know that the down sleeping bag Roddy bought was suitable for the environment of -10 degrees Celsius. And because she was nervous, there were some fine beads of sweat on her forehead. The lights hanging inside the tent were turned off by Roddy. In the cramped space, Roddy was a little nervous at first. But he was the kind of person who was open-minded. Anyway, they were in a hurry. It was more important to lie together and recover their strength. So after a few words he said, "Sister, rest early. That way, your wounds will heal faster." Kardashian, who was struggling to find a topic to talk about, was relieved. She nodded and then fell silent. In order to make space for her, Roddy deliberately slept on his side with his back facing her. Kardashian opened her eyes wide. She did not know why, but her mind began to recall the picture book that she had flipped through in the morning. When she thought of those embarrassing pictures, her palms inexplicably sweated. Strange fantasies also appeared in her mind. Would Roddy secretly wake up in the middle of the night? Halfway through her thoughts, Roddy's breathing became louder. Drawing a bow and riding a motorcycle were activities that consumed a lot of energy. This guy was overworked and fell asleep in less than 3 minutes. Kardashian was a little stunned. She inexplicably had a feeling of wanting to be angry, but she also knew that Roddy was not made of iron. Today, he was able to lead her away from that group of people. For an ordinary person, he had done his best. Thinking of this, Kardashian's eyes softened. She turned her body and leaned back with her back facing Roddy. Then, she carefully touched his back. Separated by the sleeping bag, the warm and steady feeling made Kardashian's tense body quickly relax. The complicated thoughts in her mind also disappeared instantly. Kardashian unconsciously recalled her own experience. Since she left the stage of a young dragon, she had never slept so closely with anyone. For countless nights, Kardashian experienced the word loneliness the most. Dragons were arrogant, and because of this arrogance, they also became lonely. But she found that her heart was unprecedentedly calm and stable. She had a faint thought that she hoped this feeling could last for a long time. Why did she feel like this? Before she could think of the answer to this question, she also fell asleep. Compared with the warmth of the down sleeping bag, the thin t-shirt was no different from running naked. Li Nan, Gongqing, and the others, who were knocked out, woke up in the early hours of the morning and truly experienced what it meant to be hungry and cold. They were injured, the car could not move, and all means of communication were useless. This group of big brothers, who usually thought of themselves as tyrannical, panicked. Fortunately, there was still some food in the car. They endured the pain and ate a few mouthfuls, and their bodies recovered a little strength. But the few people who had arrows stuck in their bodies suffered, but no matter how painful it was, they did not dare to pull them out. After all, in a real cold weapon war, such arrows would not be used. Everyone who was injured did not bleed much. If they pulled them out, they might bleed to death. So, after this group of people discussed, they could only endure the pain and walk along the road. Otherwise, if they stayed in the car for the night, they would really die tomorrow. There were almost no cars on the road to the 13 Tombs reservoir at night. More than 10 people walked while hugging their shoulders, shivering in the cold. Their lips were blue, and a paparazzi could not help but cry, making the atmosphere of this group even more strange. But after walking for about 20 minutes, they finally encountered a car coming in the opposite direction. When the cold LED headlights shone on them, this group of people was so moved that they almost knelt down. But when they collectively opened their arms to stop the car slammed on the brakes with a screech, and then turned around 30 meters away from this group of people at lightning speed. This pure electric Mercedes-Benz was probably in sports mode. When it accelerated, the rear wheels actually showed signs of burning, which was enough to show how eager the driver was to escape. After the car left, the group of people looked at each other for a few seconds before they came to their senses. Next to the 13 tombs, a group of tattooed gangsters with arrows stuck in their bodies reached out to stop a car in the middle of the night. If it were them, they probably would not dare to stop. Whether they were human or ghost, they would probably have to think carefully first. This group of people was finally rescued more than an hour later. They were finally rescued by a passing black Nissan. Probably because the Nissan was carrying 4 strong men, these kind-hearted people called the emergency number of Chongping Hospital. When they asked if they should call the police, the gangsters all waved their hands and insisted that they were injured by arrows because they went out to play. This kind of nonsense was too lazy to be exposed by the rescuers. After a while, this group of people was finally taken to the hospital. However, after the 120 ambulance took this group of people away, the black Nissan continued to drive into the 13 tombs and finally found the 3 cars that this group of people had abandoned before. A few people in the car got out with a flashlight to observe, and it was not until dawn that they left. In the early morning, Zhao Hongwen, who got up on time, received a call from the private detective. "Boss, things are a bit complicated. I personally suggest that you don't have anything to do with these 2 people anymore." The first sentence made Zhao Hongwen stunned. For the past 2 days, he closed his eyes and thought of Kardashian. He really couldn't accept this bucket of cold water. He couldn't help but ask, "Didn't you find out that Roddy is an otaku whose parents died? Why can't he be involved?" "Boss, that's what was written in the information. But last night, when he was being chased by more than a dozen gangsters, he used a bow to fight back and injured 6 people. Each arrow went through a human body, injured them, and knocked them out in the wilderness. If I hadn't met this group of people with my assistant, it would be normal for a few of them to die." What? Zhao Hongwen's mouth opened wide. He never thought that the harmless Roddy could do such a thing. But when he thought of his 2 powerful bodyguards who were injured, it seemed that this kind of thing was not an accident. He already had an idea of how powerful Kardashian was, but he didn't expect that Roddy would really dare to use a bow and arrow to hurt people. Even he, who had been practicing hard for many years, had never thought of taking a hunting bow out to shoot people. For modern people, a bow was a toy to cultivate the mind and exercise the body. It had nothing to do with actual combat. The strength of the bow he used is comparable to a 100-pound crossbow. "Boss, that arrow was a target arrowhead, or else these people would have been dead." The person on the other side of the phone knew Zhao Hongwen's identity, so he spoke cautiously. "This kind of person usually looks harmless, but he can be very dangerous when pushed. I checked the car of those gangsters. They should be paparazzi from an entertainment company, but they failed to follow them and were killed by him. Those people's wounds were all in the shoulder socket or arm, no matter how far away they were. I think even if I used a pistol in actual combat, I can't be so accurate." Chapter 8:17. Zhao Hongwen was not a fool. Although he had been in contact with civilized society since he was a child, his family had a military and political background. He knew that some people in the past had to be dealt with by an entire army. Roddy would not be so exaggerated, but his behavior had shown signs that he was beyond the scope of a normal person. At this point, should he continue? As soon as this thought came into his mind, a ball of evil fire rose in his heart. This guy humiliated him and prevented him from getting in touch with Kardashian. He was just a guy with good archery skills. No matter how much trouble he caused, he could not make a name for himself in the capital. Why should he be afraid of him? Thinking of this, he narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Did he shoot an arrow and hurt someone yesterday? Those people didn't call the police?" Their identities were sensitive, so no one dared to call the police. I searched them and found that all three of them had committed crimes before. If they called the police, they would not be able to explain to their boss. You call the police for them. I will take responsibility. Which police station in Chongping? I will let them know. Those two people must be caught. Don't worry, I will pay for the investigation on a monthly basis. I will give you an extra 50,000 yuan for your hard work. If the police were to file a case and investigate, there would be nothing for private detectives to do. After all, the resources available to the state were not comparable to ordinary detectives. These guys had no problem with eavesdropping, tracking, and arresting mistresses. Naturally, they would not be willing to chase vicious fugitives. Zhao Hongwen's words satisfied the other party. After a few polite words, he hung up the phone and immediately began to contact the few close friends who had connections in Chongping. Because he was not in the system, Zhao Hongwen did not have the ability to order the director or bureau chief to investigate a case with just a phone call. It was true that his family was powerful, but he did not have the real power in his hands. Therefore, to implement these things, he had to personally arrange a meal to discuss it. There was no shortage of people in this world who flattered others, but only those who were willing to do something in return. Zhao Hongwen estimated that if he wanted to file a case and arrest the two people, he would have to promise some conditions or give some money. But for the fairy-like Kardashian, what was this little bit of hard work? Zhao Hongwen felt a voice in his mind constantly repeating something. He could not understand it, but the desire and possessiveness in his heart spread and became more and more uncontrollable. That night, Roddy and Kardashian both slept soundly. Since Roddy was confident in his anti-tracking ability, he didn't think of doing night duty. In the morning they were awakened by the twittering of birds. Looking at the sky, it should be past 7 o'clock. Kardashian always woke up at 5 o'clock. She didn't know why, but she felt that she had slept soundly, and the pain from the fight had mostly disappeared. The space in the tent was too small. When the two of them sat up, they were almost pressed against each other. However, since they slept together, they didn't take the contact as seriously as before. Roddy checked the bandage on her left arm and carefully changed the dressing. After that, he put on his clothes and got up to make breakfast. Kardashian didn't say much. After the night, the two of them seemed to have a tacit understanding. Many things didn't need to be communicated with words anymore. When Roddy got water, she put the kettle on the stove. When Roddy packed up his sleeping bag, she opened the storage bag. When men and women work together, work is not tiring. This saying didn't apply to them before, but now it became a true portrayal. Compressed biscuits, hot water, and ham sausages. The simple breakfast had a lot of calories. Looking at the vast mountain scenery, the two of them felt much better than yesterday when they were being followed. At 8 o'clock, Roddy put the tent back into the box. The two of them rode on the motorbike. Kardashian hugged Roddy more naturally than yesterday. She spoke less, but there was more inexplicable emotion in her eyes. Continuing along the mountain road to the north, Roddy rode for 3 or 4 hours before leaving the mountain area. A large number of giant windmills and generators began to appear in their field of vision. After knowing that these things could use the wind to generate energy, Kardashian stared at them for a long time. The height of this giant generator was amazing, with a fan blade more than 30 meters long. For Kardashian, this kind of man-made object was even more amazing than a simple high-rise building. After all, a house was built one brick at a time. How was such a large metal fan made? What's more, there were at least hundreds of the same generators on the grassland. It had only been a few days since she came to this world, but her understanding had been refreshed several times. Such an impact not only brought her amazement, but also changed her understanding of magic itself. It was just that she didn't know such a change herself. Roddy made up his mind not to walk on paved roads, not even the provincial or county road. He would detour around villages. Fortunately, it was all grassland terrain, so the non-dual motorbike could drive over without any pressure. However, on such roads, the car couldn't go fast, so Roddy could only drive slowly within 50 kilometers per hour. After driving like this for a day, the two of them spent another night on the grassland in the wild. On the third day, the motorbike drove into the northwest where the temperature was lower. In addition to the Tawny Mountains, they could occasionally see the desert and the Gobi Desert. Finally, Roddy drove the motorbike to the back of a hillside. After confirming that there were no surveillance cameras on the surrounding roads, he asked Kardashian to get off and wait. He took off his helmet, changed into casual clothes, and walked to the nearest small village with his tent. This village was located in the northwest of the Mongolian Autonomous Region. It was not too far away, and the population was mainly Mongolian. The infrastructure here was perfect, and it had water and electricity. The families didn't look poor, and it could even be said that half of them could afford to drive a car. Roddy first confirmed the location of the police station, and then went to the farthest place to ask the uncles and aunties who were sitting in front of the door smoking and chatting, "Where can we rent a house for a few days?" This was the Inner Mongolia region, and the people here were indeed simple and honest. Roddy claimed to be a backpacker from the capital. Because of his injury, he wanted to stay here for a few days to rest, and the cost was negotiable. The uncles and aunties were enthusiastic to help. Because the younger generation of the village had gone to work in the city, there were really many empty houses. When Roddy asked, they immediately said, "It's free, you can stay anywhere you want. If you want to eat anything, just tell me." Regardless of whether it was polite or not, this kind of enthusiasm could not be felt in the capital. Naturally, Roddy couldn't live for free. After discussing with an old man nearby, he paid a deposit of 500 yuan. This was the result of Roddy wanting to pay 1,000 yuan, but the old man forced half of it back. After entering this ugly little yard, Roddy found that today's countryside was already different from the one 30 or 40 years ago in the movies. In addition to tending to some of his own vegetables and feeding his own chickens, there was water, electricity, internet, and heating. The room arranged for Roddy also had a computer. There was nothing lacking. The life of the landlord, Mr. Zhang, and his wife were very simple. Playing mahjong, square dancing, listening to the news broadcast every day after the weather forecast, they just strolled around and went to bed. This was exactly what Roddy wanted. The house that was vacated for Roddy was originally prepared by Uncle Zhang for his son. However, his son had already started a family in the city 7 years ago and would only come back twice a year. Instead of renting it to Roddy, it was better to say that they wanted a young man to be more energetic in the courtyard. Even if it was just accompanying him, it would be good. Roddy chatted with him warmly for a while, and then went out of the village to buy some daily necessities. In fact, he went out of the village, came to the place where the motorcycle was parked, and told the plan to Kardashian. Because her appearance was too unique, Roddy didn't let anyone know the existence of Kardashian along the way. So whether it was to refuel or go to the supermarket to buy some supplies, Roddy was alone with a scarf. Now even if he rented a house, he didn't mention the existence of Kardashian. He just told her to go into the village after dark and climb over the wall to rest. Since he had decided to go against the rules of this world, Roddy naturally had to make sure that he didn't leave any loopholes. Kardashian also understood this, so after the two agreed on a time, Roddy returned to the village. Even if he rented a house as a backpacker, he tried his best to avoid people's sight. After returning, he had dinner with the enthusiastic uncle and aunt. He didn't expect that the two old people would specially stew mutton for him, and he was really touched. After all, no one had cooked for him for so many years. After dinner, Roddy took the initiative to help clean up. It was late in Inner Mongolia. After 8 o'clock, it was completely dark, and the village fell into silence. At this time, the temperature was still below zero, So the old couple went back to their house early to rest, while Roddy waited behind the wall in the dark. Before long, the agile Kardashian jumped over the wall. She was so agile and light that the dog next door didn't notice her. Roddy habitually caught her with both hands. In order to lead the way in the dark, he had to gently pinch Kardashian's wrist and lead her all the way back to his room. Kardashian's face was covered by a scarf, so her expression couldn't be seen clearly. But after entering the room, Roddy saw that her eyes were shining, and she was obviously in a good mood. He glanced around. The furnishings in the room were simple, with 2 chairs, a desk, a computer desk, and a double bed next to it. When Roddy was about to explain, Kardashian waved her hand. "It's already like this. It's easy to cause trouble if we change it. It's not like we haven't slept in a crowded room these days. Just make do with it." She had an indifferent look on her face, which made Roddy swallow his words. There was no sofa in the room. A few days ago, Roddy might really consider sleeping on the floor on a mat. But as Kardashian said, they had slept in a crowded room in the tent. Now that it was urgent, they had to sleep on the same bed. It didn't seem to be unreasonable. After all, the most important thing now was to solve the main problem: how to leave the prison of time and space. "I plan to order 2 machines that can log into Earthbreaker, and then get 2 accounts. It should be here before the day after tomorrow. Hopefully, we can find the answer in the game," Roddy said as he made her a cup of tea. Then, he sat down on the white wooden chair tiredly and sighed. "The more worrying thing now is, what should we do after logging in? You're used to the game world, so you probably won't be able to find any clues. But as a native, I might be able to find some clues." Chapter 8:18. There was an antique computer on the table. In today's world where quantum computers were already running Earthbreaker, this heavy LCD screen desktop could be considered a product of the previous era. It might not be able to play games with a keyboard and mouse, but it was more than enough to surf the internet. Roddy registered an account on a website that did not require a mobile phone to authenticate. He then bought the cockpit of Earthbreaker with cash on delivery. After that, he taught Kardashian Pinion and how to operate the computer. The latter's learning ability was comparable to that of an AI. After half an hour, Roddy did not need to say anything. Kardashian could operate the computer on her own. Kardashian first glanced at the news website to understand the concept of 9-year compulsory education. Then, she typed in elementary school mathematics, and silently scrolled the mouse. After the 2 of them took turns to shower, she continued to sit in front of the computer and read seriously. Roddy glanced at it and realized that the content had changed to middle school physics. It was not appropriate for him to say something like, "Let's hurry up and go to bed," so he went to sleep first. However, when he woke up the next day, Roddy found that she was still sitting in front of the computer. Even her posture had not changed. "Sister, you didn't sleep last night, did you?" He sat up with sleepy eyes and found that Kardashian was reading advanced mathematics. He suddenly felt a little scared. What would such an existence with such a strong brain become after learning the knowledge of countless people in the modern world? Although Kardashian was full of energy, her body was not as strong as when she was in the dragons. At this time, there were dark circles under her eyes, but she could not stop studying. It was as if she had taken drugs. She replied without turning her head, "Why are you awake?" After saying that, she glanced at the clock and realized that it was already 6 in the morning. Her movements were a little stiff as she rubbed her cheeks. It was obvious that she was very sleepy. Roddy thought that she was too embarrassed to sleep in the same bed with him, so he hurriedly got up and said, "Hurry up and sleep. Your body can't stand it." She didn't think too much because she couldn't even lift her eyelids. Fortunately, she lay down on the bed next to her. Just as Roddy tucked her in, Kardashian suddenly said, "Roddy, are you willing to trust me?" This question was out of the blue, but Roddy couldn't possibly have another answer. He said in a low voice, "Sister, of course I believe you. What happened?" However, Kardashian did not respond. Roddy took a closer look and found that she had overused her brain. She closed her eyes and fell asleep. Turning his gaze back to the browser that was still open, Roddy found that the Advanced Mathematics teaching page was still open. There were other high school and university courses in other subjects. Looking through the browsing history, Roddy was a little stunned when he saw the hundreds of PDF documents. In one night, did she learn almost all the basic science and technology courses in junior high and senior high school, and even freshman and sophomore year? From this moment on, Roddy suddenly realized that his space-time prison, this time, had already caused something to go on the track of losing control. He couldn't predict what the result would be, but when he came back to his senses, he couldn't stop what he had to do. Roddy did not think that he could hide here forever, so he did not dare to waste any more time. After having breakfast with the elderly couple, he used the excuse of losing his mobile phone and borrowed Uncle Zhang's mobile phone to register for Taobao. He also bought himself and Kardashian an authentication-free alternate account of Earthbreaker. After that, Roddy found an excuse to go to the canteen and buy a lot of snacks. The consequence of overusing his brain was that the body's calories were consumed quickly. Kardashian hid in the house and couldn't come out to eat. To prevent her from getting hungry, Roddy specially bought a lot of meat pies and other hard stuff. He came back and sat in front of the computer, trying to find clues, but his eyes unconsciously moved to Kardashian's face. Roddy vaguely felt that it wasn't a good idea to let her learn this systematically, but after thinking about it, this feeling mainly came from fear. He didn't know if this dragons would become unfamiliar to him. After all, humans and dragons were different. Their starting points were different, and the difference in intelligence was like heaven and earth. He was already past the age where he could learn the most. This could be seen from the fact that he spent so much effort learning magic. It was almost impossible for him to absorb knowledge like a sponge at any time like the dragons. In the future, the gap between the two of them would only get bigger and bigger. During the time in the Magic Tower and the Prison of Time and Space, the two of them had similar strength, which made Roddy unconsciously ignore this gap. But now the fact suddenly made him come back to his senses. The gap produced unfamiliarity, and unfamiliarity meant alienation. Thinking of this, Roddy felt uncomfortable. But he soon realized that the problem had nothing to do with Kardashian, but with himself. From entering the prison of time and space, until now, the two of them had been living together. Their days were no different from cohabiting boyfriend and girlfriend. Plus, after a few fights, the feelings that grew in the bottom of his heart were difficult to control. Although time breeds affection, there was always sharing weal and woe. But after sighing, Roddy also knew that he had to face reality. The two of them were not the same kind of people. It was fine to be friendly and cooperate, but crossing the line would be troublesome. Fate but not fate? Roddy looked at the law of entropy on the screen that he could not understand and unconsciously thought of this word. But as soon as he said it, he realized that he had said something wrong. He turned his head to look at Kardashian and saw that she was still sleeping soundly. Only then did he relax. But when he got up to leave, he did not notice that Kardashian's eyelashes moved slightly, and the hands hidden under the quilt were slowly clenched, ********* at the same time. The Chongping Public Security Bureau set up a special task force to investigate the serious injury that occurred in the 13 Tombs reservoir area. The situation was a little strange. The police rushed to help the victim investigate the assailant, but the group of hooligans wrapped in bandages did not seem to be enthusiastic about providing clues. They hemmed and hawed and did not give any details, which brought great difficulty to the investigation. When such news was reported to the big boss, Wang Baogang, the bald man in his 50s, was naturally furious. Wang Baogang was the chairman of Jin Mao Entertainment Film and Television Company, but in private, he also had a lot of shares in the gray industry chain in various fields. But as a gangster in his early years, his temperament was naturally not as good as those overseas returnees who came from a decent background. Who the F***ck asked you to call the police? Is your brain filled with sh**t? Are you tired of living? At this time, he was in the office scolding his subordinate on the 3D monitor. The bracelet in his hand was thrown aside, and the 3D projection of the teacup hit the wall with a clang. He was so angry not just because his subordinate messed up. In fact, with his reputation, if it was just a case of filing a case at the police station, it could be settled with a phone call. However, this special task force was suddenly set up and a deputy supervisor was sent. This was not something he could intervene in. There seemed to be an invisible net slowly opening behind him. Although he was not the target, he was also caught in it. Wang Baogang did not go to school for many years, but he was very sensitive to official matters. After he finished scolding his subordinate, he had to think about the wording. Then, he picked up a quantum encrypted line and dialed an overseas number. The first person who picked up the phone was the secretariat. After confirming his identity and reporting the matter, the call was transferred to another line. After that, the 3D screen no longer showed the image of the person on the other side. Only a slightly cold male voice could be heard after the call was connected. I saw the report. Sir, this is really a bit strange. Wang Baogang's forehead was sweating profusely. There was no one in front of him, but he stood up and bowed to talk. The quantum phone did not have the delay of the satellite phone, so he had the opportunity to quickly explain the incident. The person on the other side paused and continued, I got it. Stop tracking. Sir, this matter has nothing to do with you. The phone was cut off, and Wang Baogang suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. He sat on the chair and panted for a long time. It was very stressful to deal with this boss, who was in England but could speak fluent Chinese. Great wealth and great danger were often decided in a few words. However, the other side was also a person of his word. If he said, it has nothing to do with, the other side would not pay attention to this in the future. However, he was actually very curious. Why would such a mysterious but powerful person care about a civilian like Roddy? But Wang Baogang knew that these thoughts could only rot in his stomach. In an office thousands of miles away, the middle-aged man known as Sir slowly stood up from a high-tech office chair made of fiber materials. The decoration here was a condensation of the most advanced technology on Earth. The development of quantum computers made artificial intelligence a reality. The mechanical face projected on the wall was the first secretary of Sir here. The thin Sir wore a custom-made suit and held a black cane made of unknown material in his right hand. He was handsome and in his 50s, but he looked like he was in his 40s. It was the age when men were full of charm. The Sir behaved like an old-fashioned aristocrat, but everyone knew that his Sir had been bestowed by the Queen 10 years ago on the grounds of outstanding service to the United Kingdom. Although it was not the kind of title that could be bought with money, it was still incomparable to those old families that had been passed down for hundreds of years. However, his actual social status was simply incomparable to those old nobles. The target has been disturbed. Now give up physical search. Instead, monitor inside the server. Once you log in or have a keyword prompt, immediately lock down. Recorded, sir. The data monitoring department will immediately carry out your orders. Arrange a plane to the imperial capital. Sir, do we need to inform the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on the grounds of a business visit? No need. Send a letter over there. This is just a private operation. Okay, sir. When the emotionless AI electronic voice sounded, Sir had already walked out of the office. The skywalk composed of display glass was the most distinctive feature of this base. If one was a little further away, one could see rows of huge server matrices with a very sci-fi style. These were only the devices that carried out heat dissipation and energy conversion for the quantum server. In the center of the base was a hemispherical all-glass building that covered an area of more than 3,000 square meters. It was the world's first and only commercial quantum computer used for game data processing. Chapter 8:19. On the fourth day of his stay at Grandpa Zhang's house, the delivery man knocked on the front door. Roddy went out to sign for the delivery. Naturally, he used the ID that he had found online. The two Earthbreaker gaming helmets were not big. After they were folded, they looked like two small cardboard boxes. Grandpa Zhang thought that Roddy had bought some outdoor equipment and did not suspect anything. On the other hand, Roddy had bought a lot of daily necessities for him. The old man was in a good mood. After returning to his room, Roddy locked the door and placed the two heavy packages on the floor. From the corner of his eye, he saw that Kardashian had not moved an inch in front of the computer. Roddy felt that she had been bewitched for the past few days. At first, it was mathematics, physics, and chemistry textbooks. Then, it was English dictionaries, French dictionaries, and other obscure tomes. If not for China's piracy industry, these PDFs would have cost at least tens of thousands. Now, he turned his head to look and realized that Kardashian was probably reading some foreign journals. He could barely read the complicated words on them, let alone understand them. He knew that she was serious about her studies, so he did not ask for her help. After unpacking the packages, he assembled the components of the gaming helmets and started modifying the chip. Because he did not log into the account with his ID, Roddy had to make some modifications to fool the system. This kind of black account was actually illegal in Earthbreaker because the game company did not support the buying and selling of game accounts. However, how could such a thing be completely banned? Using the helmet component failure as an excuse to prevent certain data from being uploaded, even the quantum computer could not determine if it was a buying and selling account or if there was a problem with the helmet. Moreover, this kind of behavior brought prosperity to the market and certain industries. Therefore, Earthbreaker decided to turn a blind eye to it. As long as one did not cheat, they could not be bothered with them. After all, Earthbreaker did not have servers in every continent. It was purely handled by the quantum computer in England. Some things that needed to be blurred had to be blurred. Once the two helmets were ready, Roddy arranged the wiring. The limited edition gaming cabin was more comfortable to use. However, this type of helmet could be electrically stimulated to achieve a tactile transfer effect. Because the inductive signal was directly transmitted to the brain, one only needed to lie down to experience the holographic view of the game. "Sister, everything is ready." Roddy put down the helmet and said softly. Kardashian put down the mouse. When she turned around, she still had a shocked expression on her face. Roddy tilted his head and saw a string of English words written on it. He could only recognize the words particle physics, quantum, and standard model. He guessed that it was something related to quantum mechanics. Truth be told, Roddy had read books like History of Quantum Mechanics before, but they were just stories. He could roughly understand the concept of Schrödinger's cat, but he was still far from being qualified to study the meaning of quantum. Now, Roddy really felt the difference in IQ between him and Kardashian. However, Roddy thought that he had cut off those thoughts, so he did not have too many emotional fluctuations. He quietly connected the power and said, "Sister, lie down and put it on, and you can log in." However, Kardashian did not respond. Instead, she looked straight at him and suddenly said, "Roddy, if I want to become stronger, will you help me?" She actually did not want to make this request to Roddy because if she did, it might become a deal like the magic agreement between her father and Roddy. However, after thinking about it, Kardashian felt that she was different from her father. After all these years, she knew where her level was. There were many people in the clan who were stronger than her. She would not be the one to lead the Frost Dragon race in the future. From all aspects of the clan, she could only be regarded as the last in the first echelon. As for demigod, it was a goal that she could never reach in this lifetime. Under such circumstances, the clan had long given up on nurturing Kardashian. Even she herself had given up on this idea. However, after accepting these complicated knowledge and theories, Kardashian really opened the door to a whole new world. Although she understood the theories, she needed a huge amount of resources as a cornerstone to put them into practice and become strong. At the same time, these theories were secrets that the other dragons could not know. After thinking about it, Kardashian realized that the only help she could get stronger seemed to be Roddy. Other than Roddy, she did not think that any other dragons could help her in this aspect. In other words, Kardashian no longer saw Roddy as the prime minister of some human country, but as someone who could help each other. A partner who gave selflessly. But was this feeling just wishful thinking? She was both eager and afraid of this answer. At this moment, she finally could not hold it in and asked impulsively. Her words were without rhyme or reason, but Roddy vaguely realized something in his heart. He put the helmet aside, walked to her side and sat down. "Sister, are you talking about becoming a demigod? Or even higher?" Kardashian nodded hesitantly. She had actually blurred the concept of demigod. At this moment, the mind of this dragon's had been filled with countless formulas, theorems, and theories. The angle of understanding the world made her realize that she, or the entire dragons in her impression, was a frog at the bottom of a well. Roddy did not hesitate and answered happily, "Yes, of course I'm willing." But Kardashian's expression did not change. She only continued to say, "I can't continue to move forward with just my own strength. That's why I want to ask you this question. Is Efta's strength enough to help you?" Kardashian's gaze trembled. She did not expect Roddy to answer so directly. There seemed to be a sudden surge of warmth in her heart. But she was still afraid that all this was fake. She nodded, then shook her head. To reach a higher realm, it's not just about broadening your horizons, passing on knowledge, and changing your way of thinking. More importantly, it's about understanding the laws of the world. I don't know if Efta's strength is enough, but if you want to break through, the more resources you have, the better. She only made a request, but did not say what she would give in return. If this was a negotiation, it would mean that she was being arrogant. But she did not treat all of this as a negotiation with Roddy. This was not a deal, but more like an interrogation of her own heart. "I definitely did not and will not use him." Kardashian recalled Roddy's words, "Fate, but not fate." She could actually understand Mandarin now, so she understood that Roddy was not as calm as he appeared. Therefore, her eyes were fixed on Roddy, but her face still maintained a calm expression, as if she did not care about the answer, but Roddy did not hesitate at all. He nodded and said, "Efta is indeed a little small now, but what about the entire kingdom of Karen? What about Tasman, the Orcs, and even the countries in the east combined? Or the other vast continents on the other side of the ocean? Will all of them combined be enough?" These words made Kardashian choke. She suddenly felt that she could not speak. After a few seconds, she put on an expression of disbelief and looked away. She said in a low voice, "Since when did you learn to paint a big picture? You speak so confidently. Do you think I'm a 10-year-old girl?" "Efta has been accumulating strength. Sister, it's not like you can't see what I want to do. Trains, planes, roads, trucks, and even fleet. I spent so much effort just because I think these things are fun." This was the first time that Roddy had revealed his hidden ambition in front of outsiders. Kardashian's pupils shrank. Yes, she had stayed in Elson City for so long. Did she really think that this guy was a small rich character? After thinking this through, she realized that Roddy's words were specifically for her to hear. It could also be said that it was the most irrefutable response to her unreasonable request. The emotions that had been suppressed just now suddenly surged up because she realized that she had made the right bet. This guy in front of her also did not treat her as an outsider. And he even said fate, but not fate. This guy was just saying what he hated. The joy in her heart could not be stopped, but Kardashian still pretended to be angry. She got up and punched Roddy. You still ask me if it's fun? You really have the guts now. You don't take me, your sister, seriously, do you? Roddy held his head and begged for mercy. But in fact, the punches really did not have much force on his body. He felt a lot more comfortable after the 2 punches. He lowered his head and secretly broke out in cold sweat. Kardashian's words were indeed a test for him. If he answered half a sentence wrong, he might not be able to be friends in the future. Fortunately, Roddy had some mental preparation in advance, so he successfully passed. But when he asked himself, he found that he still had some unrealistic fantasies. He did not know if she had noticed. The 2 of them played like this, but they were both very nervous. After a few punches, Kardashian remembered the business at hand. By the way, can I log into the game? Yes, I can log in. Roddy rubbed his nose and pretended to look at the computer screen. At this time, Kardashian's face was flushed, and the corners of her mouth were slightly raised. The flirtatious look in her eyes made him lose the courage to look at her directly. He was afraid that he would have some impulse that he should not have. And Kardashian seemed to notice this. She coughed twice, picked up the helmet and sat on the bed. Then what are you waiting for? Stop dawdling. She lay on the bed and did not care about anything else. Roddy had to come over and stick the neural feedback sensors connected to the helmet all over her body. When he reached the last one, he said with some difficulty, Sister, this needs to be stuck on the position above the belly. So troublesome? Kardashian did not think much. She directly reached out and pulled up the warm, long johns, revealing her white belly. Roddy did not expect her to be so straightforward. Even though he had experienced many actual combat with her, he was a little embarrassed at this time. After all, the thin waist and the exposed edge of her underwear were too tempting. Her white skin was as perfect as a warm jade. Stop. Forcibly stopping the messy thoughts, Roddy stuck the sensors in the position according to the instruction manual. Then he turned around and grabbed his helmet. After skillfully putting it on, he laid down beside Kardashian. The atmosphere in the room became a little subtle. Kardashian put her hands on her belly and whispered, Then? Press the start button, sister. I will contact you in the game. Okay, I will wait for you. Chapter 820. At the same time, the task force had already driven the Camry parked in the wilderness back to the parking lot next to the Chongping police station. However, the obvious problem was that although they could confirm a lot of things, they could not figure out where Roddy had gone. The wind speed motorcycle was naturally investigated. The police also knew that Roddy rode the motorcycle and drove the Camry all the way to the wilderness. But what happened after that? There were no surveillance facilities in that desolate mountainous area. There were no obvious marks left on the asphalt road. There were almost no witnesses on the road in the middle of the night. They asked the villages along the way, but there were no clues. If these methods did not work, then they had to monitor all of Roddy's electronic information. They searched Weibo, bank cards, electronic watches, and so on. In the end, they found that Roddy did not use these things at all. Even his bank cards did not have any spending records. It had to be said that Roddy's anti-tracking methods left a lot of trouble for the investigating police. When the news reached Zhao Hongwen, he was naturally a little angry. What day and age is this? How can I not find a person I'm looking for? Although he said that, he also knew that it was useless to be anxious about this kind of thing. If an expert could not be found, then an outsider should not join in the fun. Therefore, he completely rejected all kinds of gatherings these days. He was not even interested in meeting the few women that his close friend had specially recommended to him. Every day, he sat in the bar and constantly scrolled through his phone, watching back and forth between Kardashian's interviews and archery videos. Those who were familiar with him knew that this Mr. Zhao was possessed. What was more frightening was that Zhao Hongwen did not know why he had become like this. There was a ball of desire in his heart that was constantly expanding. When his possessiveness could not be satisfied, resentment gradually grew. Hide, let's see how long you can hide. Asterisk. Outside Terminal T3, a black motorcade attracted countless people's attention, a bulletproof Mercedes-Benz S600 Mercedes-Benz E. There were 3 in front and 3 in front. In the middle was a Rolls-Royce that had always looked square no matter how many new models were released. After electric cars took over half of the market, the price of high-displacement luxury cars soared again and again due to the high emissions tax. Now they were almost extinct on the road. The fleet of cars in front of them was obviously not owned by ordinary people. This could be seen from the small flagpole attached to the hybrid version of the S600E. Anyone with a discerning eye would know that this fleet of cars was probably related to foreign affairs. Suddenly, there was a commotion from the VIP passageway, and a large number of bodyguards in black with an average height of more than 185 centimeters appeared in everyone's field of vision. Not only were they burly, but half of them had European faces. The onlookers immediately realized that an important character had appeared. It was impossible to erase the nature of watching a good show. Many people stretched their necks to see who was in the middle of the group of bodyguards, but they could only vaguely see a black gentleman's cane. The bodyguards opened the doors of the Rolls-Royce, and the silver-haired Sir stepped in without looking sideways. The others quickly got into the Mercedes-Benz next to them. The team of more than 20 bodyguards came and went like the wind. When the car went down the slope from the terminal, there were even 2 Mercedes-Benz cars guarding on the left and right sides of the Rolls-Royce. In front of them, there were even 2 knights on BMW K1600 GT motorcycles clearing the way. However, this was already the lowest standard welcome ceremony. This time, Sir had informed the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the embassy in advance and entered China as a purely private matter. One had to know that he was at the helm of a consortium in the United Kingdom, so he also had a variety of large enterprises in China and even other countries. If he went to other provinces, it was normal for the top leader to personally come out to receive him. These enterprises under his name had countless branches, and Wang Baogong's Jinmao Entertainment Pictures was just a drop in the bucket. In other words, if it were not for Roddy and Kardashian appearing in the capital, people like Wang Baogang would not be qualified to talk to him directly. But this time, Sir came to the capital to solve the problem that Wang Baogang did not solve. The motorcade drove all the way to the Technology Industrial Park in Haidian District, which was the largest branch of Earthbreaker in China. Because the quantum computer in the United Kingdom itself was considered a world server, the role of this place was to carry out customer service maintenance and marketing. The identity of Sir was undoubtedly the #1 boss, and his legendary life now had a large number of fans worldwide, far more amazing than Steve Jobs. After the motorcade entered the park, Sir simply walked around the various departments of the company, gave a 10-minute speech in the conference hall, and said some polite words before entering the room in the rest area. The heavily guarded bodyguards stood outside, and the executive officer of the capital branch briefly reported the work and left. A middle-aged female secretary of British nationality came into the room with an AR screen with the C logo. Sir's face, which had been maintaining a calm expression, finally had some ripples. He looked up and said, "Report the results." "Sir, the results of the current screening are about 960,000. Although the scope has been narrowed from tens of millions to this range in the past 2 days, I am afraid it will still take a long time for the final confirmation. Just continue to wait. The secretary nodded, but she was very puzzled. The big boss in front of her used a quantum computer to search for 2 targets among hundreds of millions of active users around the world. Why? She did not know the conditions of the search. These things were only known by the people who set it up. Obviously, she was not qualified to ask. However, when she was about to leave, a new email appeared on the screen. The secretary knew that this email was an absolute priority, so she opened it in front of Sir and reported, "News from London, the Consciousness Separation Research and Development Department has the latest progress." The expression of Sir finally became serious, and he said in a deep voice, "Let me see. Sister, accept the friend request." Kardashian, who was looking around, saw a line of words appearing in front of her. She raised her eyebrows and found that there were a lot of boxes in her eyes. After a long time, she found the friend communication bar, and it said, "Europe Reinhaken wants to invite you as a friend." This name. Why is it so strange? Kardashian cursed in her heart, and then she remembered that her account ID was Sleepy Fox. It also sounded like a joke. She shook her head and accepted, and then the voice chat option popped up. Before she clicked on it, Roddy sent a voice request. After the call connected, Roddy's familiar voice came through, "Sister, where are you right now? There is a coordinate option in the map bar, just give me the coordinate." Turning her head, Kardashian saw an unfamiliar village in front of her, but looking at the clothes of the people around and listening to the language they spoke, it should be located in the eastern part of the kingdom of Karen. The size of this town could not be considered large, and one could find the edge of it at a glance. The time column in the upper right corner showed that it was currently the 23rd of June, 591 of the Elon calendar. For her, this time period belonged to the future. All of this was strange to Kardashian. A carriage creaked past in front of her, and she leaned against the side of the road, vaguely feeling as if she had already left the space-time prison. However, the frame in front of her indicated that she was in the game Earthbreaker. She gave the coordinates according to Roddy, and not long after, she saw a fellow with a great sword on his back running over from the other side of the town. "This thing is too heavy," all of the senses in Earthbreaker pursued realism, and the muscles would ache from the heavy load. So with a "chee" sound, he stabbed the greatsword that weighed more than 10 kilograms into the ground and took a deep breath. This is the game. We're currently in the town of Bricado, and the capital is 70 kilometers south. Roddy actually could not be considered familiar with this area, but the towns in the kingdom were more or less the same. At worst, he could just go out and search the internet at any time. However, the urgent matter at hand was to quickly find clues. "Sister, can you see any clues here? I'm not really used to your appearance." Kardashian, on the other hand, felt that it was quite amusing. She circled around Roddy twice, looking here and there at the armor, pinching her cheek. It really doesn't look too different from the real world. Since Roddy had changed his account, his appearance naturally changed. In fact, if the two of them created a new level 1 account, they could indeed look exactly the same as the original. However, Roddy had specially spent 20,000 yuan to buy an advanced account so that he would have more confidence when traveling across the continent. At this moment, Sleepy Fox's Elementalist, had advanced to level 4. His main class was a two-handed greatsword, and his base level was a level 15 swordsman. His main class was an Elementalist, and his base level was a level 14 ice magic. The previous online games couldn't possibly be this realistic, because this is the first game to use a quantum computer to perform real-time calculations. It's said that in order to ensure realism, the game company spends millions on server maintenance every day. As he spoke, he wasn't afraid that Kardashian wouldn't understand. After all, the little female dragon had already read 7 or 8 professional papers on quantum mechanics. As she listened, she performed all sorts of experiments. She touched the nearby houses, kicked the dirt under her feet, then took out her staff and silently chanted an incantation. Magician's hand appeared out of thin air and picked up a rock from the ground. "Pa!" With a wave of her hand, Kardashian threw the rock into the distance. Watching all of this, Roddy couldn't help but exclaim in his heart. It was simply impossible for an ordinary player to cast spells this skillfully. Most elementalist players had to activate magic assist in battle. What incantation, casting gestures, and materials! It was very difficult for them to do everything on their own. Players were here to relax, not to take a master's degree. So after Earth Splitters, Magic Assist, was activated, it automatically assisted the player in performing these actions. Some people felt that after doing it a few hundred times, they could do it themselves, so they turned off the Magic Assist and gave it a try. However, most people discovered that when they actually encountered a monster, they couldn't even cast a sand-scattering spell smoothly, let alone a great fireball that required 5 seconds to cast. Similarly, archery and slashing monsters all had a certain degree of support. If the player relied purely on their own movements to fight monsters, they would definitely make a fool of themselves. However, there was no lack of players who had trained their strength to the point where they could survive on this continent, such as Roddy. Chapter 8:21. Kardashian frowned after the magician's hand was cast. She looked down at the staff in her hand and was about to cast another spell when Roddy held her back. "Sister, it's better to be careful in the town. Casting spells casually will attract trouble." What kind of trouble?" Kardashian turned around and asked curiously. She heard the waiter at the entrance of the tavern yelling in Bringen, "Which idiot threw a stone here? Don't you have anything better to do?" The waiter looked over. There was no one around. Judging from the direction, he could tell that it was either Roddy or Kardashian who did it. The bartender wanted to say something but swallowed his words when he saw the robe on Kardashian's body. It was obvious that a swordsman could be offended, but who knew what kind of background the elementalist had? Seeing that the bartender did not dare to say anything and returned to the tavern, Kardashian's expression became more solemn. She turned and asked, "Was that person played by another player or an NPC?" Kardashian was used to such professional terms. Roddy answered naturally, "Why would a player be a bartender? That's an NPC." "Just a computer simulation?" Kardashian took a deep breath. This was something she could not believe. Although she had understood what the computer was all about, the NPCs in normal games were programmed. In order to save resources, they would not even trigger the dialogue of unrelated characters. However, an inconspicuous bartender in the tavern in Earthbreaker actually knew how to act according to the character's judgment? How could a computer simulate that kind of profiteering? It must be a computer simulation. Roddy realized that this was a little shocking to his common sense. He explained, "This is also a big selling point of Earthbreaker. Because the quantum computer is on a completely different level from the previous computers, the research on AI artificial intelligence was also applied in the game. Back then, the publicity was that this was no different from the real world. All the characters had their own thoughts because each of them was an independent AI. In fact, Roddy did not mention the more glorious achievements of Earthbreaker. With the support of the quantum computer, it directly brought online gaming to a whole new level. Many people even called it a real second world, a daydream, or a huge sense of nothingness. The number of online users of Earthbreaker, which swept the world, exceeded 100 million in the first month. If it were not for the high requirements of the hardware, it would not have been a problem for the total number of users to exceed 500 million. Quantum computing hadn't been used in the military field yet, but it had already been used in a game. This was ridiculous. After that, various countries even set up various working groups to seek cooperation from Knight. Because of this, Knight, the helmsman of Earthbreaker, had an unusually strong international status. At Rhodey's level, he was unable to understand the specific impact. However, at this moment, Roddy was feeling a little proud. After all, this was the technology of humans on Earth. It could shock Kardashian, the dragons. Roddy felt honored. How far can this AI go? Can they live on their own? Do farmers know how to farm? Do merchants know how to sell goods and bargain? Kardashian asked many questions, but there was only one core. Could the AI reach the level of a real person? Roddy's answer was a definite yes. As a player who relied on his archery skills to survive on this continent, he naturally understood the power of the AI. To put it bluntly, if the various frames in front of him were forcefully hidden and the highest version of the game cabin was used, there wouldn't be much difference between here and the real world. The surrounding NPCs had their own beliefs and subjective initiative. They would interact on their own, and the country would fight on its own. Even if the players didn't enter, the world could still function. Even though Earthbreaker had more than 100 million active players and 300 million registered players, it wasn't realistic for all of them to gather on this continent. Roddy had heard that the quantum computer divided the players into thousands of server regions. The actual number of players in each server wouldn't be too high. Thus, there wouldn't be a situation where players would dominate the population and change the world's structure. As for the distribution method, Roddy had also heard a lot of complaints from the big guilds in the server. This was because the Earthbreaker had a problem where the players could not choose their own server. This made the players feel puzzled. After all, most people fought together with 2 or 3 friends. There were also some large guilds that developed together with thousands of players. However, because of this rule, they couldn't get together at all. Everyone entered different servers and was born in different places. Thus, it was almost impossible for them to unite and change the world. After a long time, the players realized that there were people from all kinds of countries around them. Everyone had different ethnicities and values. The sense of identity was almost zero. It was difficult to create any waves at the national level. In a server, the biggest unit of players was the guild. However, these guilds, formed by various people, usually didn't have a strong sense of unity. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so easy for Roddy to kill the higher-ups of the guilds alone. To put it bluntly, the players in the game couldn't change the world. They were just part of the world. In the tide of history, they could only go with the flow and try their best to stand firm. They couldn't go against the tide and make any changes. The invasion of the orcs and the tide of the undead caused many hardships in the kingdom of Karen. Many people were so angry that they cooled down because they complained that their camp was so useless. The official reply of Earthbreaker was simple. Everything was the result of the quantum computer's calculations. This was a real world. Because it was real, there was no such thing as justice will prevail over evil. Later on, everyone understood that this was the only company that could make the game feel like a second life. They didn't have a choice, so they decided to continue playing. Therefore, some people continued to lead a befuddled life in the game, while others fought for their belief. In the end, they formed a balanced world. How did Roddy change the tide completely? It was because he appeared at the crucial juncture of the year 588. The wind rose at the end of the green duckweed. Roddy changed everything at the beginning. Therefore, he should have changed the whole situation with his own strength. According to what you've said, when the war came, the players behaved more or less the same as the natives. Some of them held back, some actively resisted, some incited dissension, and some simply hid in the forest as if it had nothing to do with them? After listening to Roddy's explanation, she had a deeper understanding of Earthbreaker. However, the doubts in her heart didn't disappear. Instead, she felt that the game was full of doubts. Roddy, among these people, are there any that you are familiar with? For example, can you find Sally and see if she is exactly the same as that Eiffel Duke? Her words stunned Roddy, but he immediately understood her intention. Although the AI in this world was complete, these AI were set by humans. Then, would the AI that was set be exactly the same as the people in the kingdom of Karen? It would be fine if they were different, but if they were exactly the same, that would make one shudder with fear. Roddy shivered, but he still had to answer the question. But when he thought of Sally, his face darkened. In this game, Sally died before the server started. If you're talking about finding me and people I know, Akasha is probably in the Viper Cross right now. I don't know if she's alive or dead. Zodler became the leader of the resistance army after the Orc invasion, but he's probably just a small team leader now. He hasn't reached a high position yet, so it won't be easy to find him. Not a can, but it'll take a few days to reach the Silent Forest from here. At this point, Roddy suddenly froze. He realized that he had neglected a lot of things. He knew Natha because he knew that she was quiet, and he even remembered that she liked to wear red leather armor. He took the initiative to get to know Zodler because he knew that this guy was clear-headed and cautious. After saving Naife, he unintentionally cooked according to her taste in the game. Didn't all this mean that they were the same both in and out of the game? Realizing this fact, Roddy instantly broke out in a cold sweat. Kardashian saw that he stopped halfway and asked curiously, "What should we do?" Luo Di explained his judgment to him. Kardashian shook her head after listening. "What you said can't be used as a completely valid proof. But hearing you say this, I just thought of a problem. Human life is limited, and personal perception will usually change drastically in situations like war. If the historical process of the two worlds is completely different, then I'm afraid there's no way to verify many things. And the biggest problem is that the human brain is complex, and you can't confirm whether your verification is accurate or not. What if everything is just a coincidence?" This series of questions was also rhetorical, and Kardashian almost denied her own idea, but then she suddenly knocked on her head. "Hey! I was tricked by myself. What's wrong? I've been thinking about using humans as proof, but I forgot that I'm a dragon. The disputes on the continent have no effect on dragons." Kardashian exhaled. Roddy thought it made sense and said, "The key is that I think it's difficult to confirm the location of the dragons. Sister, do you have any way to find them? Who are we going to find?" Chapter 8:22. When she said this, Roddy's expression suddenly became very interesting. He looked at Kardashian with his mouth wide open and was stunned for a few seconds. "Sister, do you mean to find you in this world? It's year 591 now. If it weren't for the Demon's Gate, I would have been guarding the same place from year 590 to year 598. Speaking of which, it's not far from here. The area that my father divided for me is in the mountains in the northeast of the capital," Kardashian answered calmly. She did not feel that her idea was bold at all. "I can't find the other members of the clan because you and I are now in the appearance of ordinary humans. Even if I find them, I won't be able to see them. But when it comes to myself, I have a way to make her appear." She was naturally referring to Kardashian in the game Earthbreaker. This idea was really ridiculous to Roddy, but logically speaking, it was very feasible. Only he himself would know whether he was himself or not. This sounded awkward, but it was the best way to prove himself. "The specific location, is it near the McRath Mountains? Sister, why don't you open the map bar and give me the coordinates?" Roddy did not delay and immediately began to prepare. After she gave him the approximate location, he chose the way to go. "It will take about a day to get there on horseback. but after entering the mountains there will be a lot of danger. The monsters in that area are not low level. We have to prepare the things we need to buy in advance." As he said this, Roddy began to make a list on the memo. He also checked the money pouches on their waist. Although these 2 accounts were bought, there were enough gold coins in them. It was not a problem to buy these things. So, the 2 of them began to buy things in the nearby town, including horses. If one wanted to go on an adventure in Earthbreaker, there was no difference in preparation for an adventure in the real world. Characters would starve to death if they did not eat. Venomous snakes could also poison them to death. Living in the forest, they had to be careful of strange magical beasts. Even the horses had to be nourished in time. Otherwise, if they died of hunger on the way, the unlucky one would be the adventurer. As a dragon's, Kardashian had never thought so much before. After all, as an existence at the top of the food chain, she could do whatever she wanted. However, Roddy was an expert in this field, and his preparations were exceptionally efficient. In less than half an hour, the 2 of them led 2 horses to the south of the town. It was noon, the time when the town was bustling. As the 2 of them walked out, Roddy gave Kardashian a brief introduction of the differences between the game and the real world. Dead players can be resurrected, but they'll lose EXP and equipment. NPCs, on the other hand, won't remember player death. That's the biggest difference. Back then, Roddy had fallen in love with Naife because this AI was no different from a real person. However, players could be resurrected, but NPCs only had 1 life. Roddy actually wanted to visit her. After all, Mogra village had not been affected by the flames of war yet. However, after thinking about it for a while, he felt that it was meaningless. After all, Naife in the year 591 was a standard little lowly. Even if they met, she would not recognize him. It would only make things more awkward. Now was not the time to wander around. It was more important to find clues as soon as possible. With this thought in mind, the 2 of them led their horses out of the town. Coincidentally, they came face to face with a group of people who were returning from outside. Roddy looked up and saw that it was a team of 8 people. There were shield-wielding warriors, priests with scepters, and rangers with bows hanging from their waists. It was obviously a team of players who had just finished a dungeon outside and returned to the town. In this server, they basically did not know each other. In this situation, they did not even have the mood to nod and greet each other. Roddy rode forward without looking sideways. Kardashian silently followed behind him. Roddy thought that the 2 of them would not cross paths after this, but suddenly there was a scream. "Ah! My hand! My hand!" The road leading to the outside of the town was not wide. Roddy and this team almost passed by each other. The guy who screamed and fell to the ground happened to be standing next to the horse behind Kardashian. When Roddy turned around, he had already drawn his sword and pulled the reins. "What happened?" Kardashian frowned and said, "That guy wanted to steal something." This sentence was enough. Roddy turned to the group of players in front of him and said, "What do you mean?" The guy who was lying on the ground cried. Everyone saw that his right hand was nailed into the palm of his hand by a slender icicle. The sharp end of the icicle poked out from the back of his wrist. This kind of pain was not something an ordinary person could endure. Even if the players adjusted their pain to the lowest possible level, it was still enough to make them suffer. The guy who tried to steal something was screaming in pain. The 7 people next to him were obviously shocked. They were considered a small guild team that had only been working together in the past month. They understood each other, so they knew that this advanced thief was very normal. Although he had the steal skill, he had never used it. And there was a basic common sense among the players. Steal skill could be used outside of the town. Even if you were brave enough to use it in the dragon's nest, it would not be a problem. But in the vicinity of the town, usually stealing or fighting would not cause trouble. Otherwise, if you encountered a powerful guard and were to be questioned by the nobles, the result might be worse than death. Some people were sentenced to 3 years in prison because of this, and had to start a smurf again. The price was not ordinary. Originally, no one would have thought much of it if they just walked past, but Kardashian did it without warning. When everyone saw the horse's luggage being opened, they naturally knew that it was not a random shot. So the players were suddenly embarrassed and stood there for a moment, not knowing what to say. The quality of the players was mixed, and some things in the game were naturally magnified. In a civilized society, stealing was definitely wrong, but the environment of Earthbreaker had made people used to the law of the jungle. When the strength of the 8 people was compared to the strength of the 2 people in front of them, the reason was not in the hearts of the 8 people, but in the hands of the weapons of the more people. Even if you want to steal, you must have evidence. You too, it is not appropriate to attack without reason, right? The leader of the team, the berserker named Scourge, glanced at both sides. After confirming that the nearest guard was far away, he turned his head and spoke impolitely. As he spoke, he took a step forward, obviously not intending to admit the fact that his teammate had stolen something. His companions naturally understood where they stood, and they slowly surrounded him. The thief who was knocked down had already changed from screaming to cursing. "That's right. I was just passing by. Are you guys trying to pick a fight?" Roddy was very vigilant after entering the game. He was not the kind of person who would let such a thing happen, and he would take revenge on the spot. However, time was of the essence, and there was no point in wasting time here. After a short moment of consideration, he immediately tried to smooth things over. That might be a misunderstanding. Let's all take a step back. How about this? I have 20 gold coins for medical expenses. Let this brother drink some wine. How about that? As he spoke, he glanced around, memorizing the appearance and characteristics of the 8 people. If possible, he would definitely take revenge, but for now, he could only let them go for now. Logically speaking, 20 gold coins was not a small amount. Scourge's group had only earned 2 or 3 gold coins each from running a dungeon. Roddy's attitude was full of sincerity. The few team members that surrounded him looked at each other, obviously tempted. However, the leader of the team, Scourge, who was standing there, was in a daze. Then, his expression turned ferocious. 20 gold coins? Do you think we are beggars? If you know what's good for you, leave all your equipment and get lost. When he said this, even the people beside him turned their heads in surprise. The thief who was lying on the ground even shouted, "Leader?" But Scourge's mood was obviously not right. He pulled out the 2-handed sword from his waist and pointed it at Roddy. "I'll give you 10 seconds, 10. Roddy frowned as he looked in front of him. He really did not expect that someone would be so persistent. Now that things had come to this, it was impossible for them to be friendly. In this group of people, there were 4 who had the strength to advance to within level 3. The rest had not advanced yet. Just from the numbers alone, there was no hope of winning. Chapter 8:23. When Bane's countdown reached 6, Kardashian raised her staff and cast Frost Arrow. At the same time, Roddy dismounted from his horse and activated Charge. He pulled out his greatsword and swung it at the priest named 2 Instruments, who was closest to him. At this distance, riding a horse would be a burden. Charging into the enemy group and creating chaos would be more lethal. The greatsword in Roddy's hand was powerful, but its weakness was that it was slow. He was not proficient in using this kind of weapon, but with the help of skills, he just needed to use all the skills he could. Blade Storm, Cleave, Whirlwind Slash were cast one after another. 3 non-advanced players in the attack range were cut into pieces on the spot. The others wanted to stop Roddy immediately, but Kardashian's spellcasting was on a completely different level compared to the ordinary players. In the time it took for an elementalist to throw 1 frost bolt, she had already thrown 3, and at the same time, she used her control spell to hold the others in place. The ranger in the team did not even have time to draw his bow before the frost arrow pierced his neck. The elementalist and priest next to him struggled desperately, but their shields were broken and they could not run away. They were smashed by Roddy's greatsword on the spot. It was indeed a smash. This kind of giant two-handed weapon did not have a sharpened edge. In Roddy's hands, it was not much different from a big iron rod. But with its weight, even a smash could smash a cloth-wearing profession to death. Bang! Another priest's chest was smashed open. The swinging blade was used as a spear by Roddy, and with a push and push, it pierced the elementalist's abdomen. Roddy threw away the two-handed sword and pulled out the short sword from his waist to slash at the berserker, who was still trying to block. The berserker was covered in ice. Although he managed to block Roddy's attack, he revealed an opening and was pierced through the chest by Kardashian's ordinary frost arrow. "We are the Heart of Fire Feather Guild." Before he could finish speaking, Roddy followed up with another slash, ending his opponent's life. He casually flicked the blood off his sword. "If you can't win, then start reporting to your backer. What were you doing earlier?" The entire battle was over in less than 10 seconds. It looked as if Roddy had charged into the enemy's formation and shredded everyone to pieces. In reality, if Kardashian hadn't disrupted the group's defensive rhythm, he probably wouldn't have been able to use his second skill. Brilliant battles often didn't lie in how flashy the moves and skills were. The ultimate goal was to kill as quickly as possible. In the blink of an eye, the party of 8 was wiped out at the edge of the town. From the start of the conflict to the end, not even a minute had passed. The show had already ended before the onlookers had even gathered. At this time, the thief, who was sitting on the ground, was completely dumbfounded. He saw his leader, Scourge, get hacked to death in front of him, and he forgot to run. Roddy walked over and finished him off with a single slash. "The guards are heading this way, sister. Let's run." After all, this account wasn't meant to be used for a long time. As long as they weren't caught after causing trouble, there wouldn't be any danger for a short period of time. Therefore, Roddy shouted at Kardashian. The two of them quickly got on their horses and ran into the forest not far away. After leaving the town, the atmosphere relaxed. After passing through a forest and onto another small path, Roddy estimated that they would reach the mountainous area by nightfall. However, reaching the mountainous area didn't mean that they would immediately encounter Kardashian. Going in to search for her would probably be the most time-consuming. After all, there were often all kinds of monsters hidden in the forest and mountainous areas. If they encountered any of the monsters that weren't easy to deal with, then the whole party would be wiped out. Running from the beginning would often take time and effort. Roddy told his worries to Kardashian, but the latter changed the topic. "You used to travel alone, right? You're always cautious about everything." This surprised Roddy, but he didn't deny it. "Yes. You don't have to worry about this kind of thing. I'll take care of it." Kardashian smiled, then her expression gradually became serious. "But I think worrying about these monsters is not as good as worrying about the players. Don't you think there's something strange about them? Or the people we met these days aren't quite right?" Roddy also faintly felt it. Logically, he and Kardashian were unknown characters in the Imperial capital. Why were they followed and encountered the 4th-generation Red Army? Now that they entered the game, they had a conflict with the players for no reason. Using theft at the edge of the town? This kind of stupid thing didn't seem like something a mature team would do. He suddenly thought of a term, Heaven's Path. This term, often seen in fantasy novels, often meant the law of heaven and earth. That is, the operation of everything followed a set law. Leaving aside the law of the normal world, would the law of the space-time prison be different from the normal world? If the purpose of creating the space-time prison was to imprison, would the Heaven's Path of this space have a completely different standard? Roddy couldn't confirm this guess, but when this thought arose, He unconsciously became nervous. When we get out of this territory, I'll go offline to confirm the situation outside. Kardashian looked at the soft and muddy road in front of her and suddenly sighed. If this is also a road we can just drive. There will be such a day. Roddy replied. After the two left the town, the Scourge leader who resurrected from the corpse stared at the thief in front of him and growled. Is there something wrong with your brain? Stealing in this kind of place? The ID of the scolded thief was Acolin. He also had a bitter expression. Leader, I don't know what I was thinking just now. I inexplicably used a skill. Do you believe what you said? What do you mean by, don't know what you were thinking? Your head is on your neck, can you still not control your body? He usually had a good temper, but today he was obviously abnormally emotional. After the party was wiped out, he was even more emotional and scolded the members one by one. The only thing that the Scourge was glad about was that the party died near the town because the guards came in time. Other than the equipment that was damaged by Roddy's greatsword, the only thing left was the loss of EXP. However, with this wipe, it meant that their hard work in the Wild Instance dungeon for a few days was all for nothing. So now, the party members' faces were unusually gloomy, and they dared not speak up even though they were angry. What if they were beaten up? Fight back. How could there be justice in this game? The bigger fist was the justice, the law of the jungle was just like that. Just let it go? The defensive warrior with the ID Magic Frog was indignant. Why are these two people like mad dogs? Did that elementalist use some kind of cheat? I've never seen such a fast casting speed. His tone was a little strange, and he sounded like a European player. On the other hand, the Ranger ID Drizzt in the party was now ridiculing Roddy. Let's not talk about that elementalist. This lucky emperor is just blindly swinging his greatsword. If he really advanced by himself, his skill level would definitely not be so low. He probably bought an account. You make it sound so good, then how did you get killed in one hit? The baby-faced priest, Yin Yang, rolled her eyes. Her voice was a little soft, and she sounded like a student. I was tied up by frost chains. Weren't you killed in one hit as well? At this distance, who other than a plate-armored class can withstand his skills? I stayed up for too long, and my brain isn't working well now. What's wrong with me not being able to react? The two of them were usually not on good terms, and just as there were signs of an argument, the party leader Scourge immediately stopped them. There's no point arguing about this. Everyone pack up now. I'll report this to the guild and ask for help from nearby members to kill him. His words were considered to have set the tone, and the party members showed a satisfied expression. However, Yin Yang asked one more question. Will the guild agree to kill him? Directly committing murder in a small town, this is a direct slap to the face of Heart of the Fire Feather. I'll definitely convince the guild leader. Thus, the party began to pack up, preparing to gather the other members of the guild to chase after the two. The guards also informed the Baron's butler. This matter did not need to go through the Baron's desk, and the wanted order was quickly issued. After the party leader Scourge organized the party, he immediately set off with his party members. This time, there were a total of 21 guild members, and someone had already reported Roddy's coordinates in the channel. All the party members believed that they would soon be able to catch these two reckless fellows. However, as the party leader Scourge moved forward, he glanced at the listless thief Acolin, and in his heart, he recalled his initial mood when he made the decision. At first, he did not intend to fight back, and even had the intention of apologizing to keep the peace. However, for some unknown reason, when he looked at Roddy, an unknown anger suddenly emerged in his mind, and later on, he defended Acolin and put on a posture of using his power to suppress the other party. This matter was known to no one but him, but when he thought of his own performance, he muttered in his heart, Chapter 824. Sir, there is an urgent report from London. The details have been sent to your personal mailbox. The Earthbreaker game base in the imperial capital and many of Jazz's industrial administrative departments in China were huge. There was a dedicated reception hotel in the park. In the penthouse suite, Sir, who was sitting in the study, heard a voice message from the secretariat. At this time, he was reading and changing the specific implementation details of the consciousness separation project. After hearing the message, his eyes flickered slightly. Then, he encrypted and locked the highest-level confidential document in front of him. At the same time, he opened his mailbox and found that it was a red label notification from the security department of the London headquarters. There are still people trying to do this? The content of the email was very formulaic. It said that the server had been under attack since 10 o'clock in the imperial capital. In fact, this could be treated as a joke. It wasn't that no one had ever thought of attacking a quantum computer. When Earthbreaker first launched, there were at least 8,000 hackers who tried to do so. However, no one was able to achieve anything. In the end, this level of attack didn't even trigger an alarm. That was because people realized that Earthbreaker's server was basically a black hole. Conventional attacks were completely ineffective. It had been a year and a half since the launch of the server, and it had been a long time since Jazz had seen such an attack notification message. The words in the message were sloppy and ordinary. At the same time, the server was as usual and did not suffer any damage. The only problem was that this kind of attack was continuous and extremely high intensity. If it was an ordinary server, it would have been paralyzed long ago. Sir quickly replied, "Find the source and use the resources of the quantum computer to fight back." This order was unprecedented. After all, the quantum server of Earthbreaker was priceless. It was normal to use it to run the various industrial calculations and maintenance of Earthbreaker, but to use it to fight back against a certain hacker was definitely a private use of public equipment. If it were any other company, this proposal wouldn't even pass the board of directors, not to mention implementation. However, Sir had absolute power. This order was carried out by London's security department almost immediately after receiving the news. The maid came over to ask if he wanted to go to the dining room for afternoon tea. Jazz nodded and got up. When he walked to the dining room and sat down, his mailbox beeped again. The quantum computer can't locate the hacker's location. This was the response given by the security department. Jazz's action of picking up the teacup froze for a moment before returning to normal. If it were someone else, they might have thought that the security department was joking. How could they say that they couldn't locate the target after more than 10 seconds? But in fact, if the quantum computer wanted to locate the hacker, even the most brilliant person on this planet would not be able to escape. If he couldn't find it, it could only mean one thing. It wasn't that the other party was too powerful, but that the other party didn't exist at all. An enemy whose whereabouts could not be found by the quantum computer was still attacking the server until now. Most people would definitely scream, "What the hell," if they saw such a thing. However, Jazz calmly finished his afternoon tea and looked at the headquarters buildings outside the panoramic window. He replied to the email, "Continue trying." After this order was issued, the people from the security department stopped replying. Obviously, if there were no results, they would have to continue searching. After that, Jazz opened an encrypted information bar, which showed the candidates for the screening of the quantum computer. Previously, when the secretary reported, there were still hundreds of thousands of yuan. Now, the number had quickly decreased to 200. However, as time passed, the speed of the number decreasing had greatly slowed down. Jazz clicked on a few things, and the AR auxiliary screen was instantly filled with words. It showed the dialogue and voice communication of these 200 suspects. Although it involved more than 12 languages, Jazz had no trouble reading it. His eyes swept across the thousands of text messages, and then he began to select and listen to the original voice of these people. Sister, you mean to find you in this world? It's year 591 now. If it wasn't for the Demon's Gate incident, I would have been on duty, at the same location from year 590 to year 598. Speaking of which, it's not too far from here. The area Father divided for me is in the mountains northeast of the royal city. The appearance of these two lines of dialogue made Jazz raise his eyebrows. First of all, the words were not in Mandarin or English, but in standard Bringan. The fact that two players spoke such authentic Bringan was a problem in itself, and the content was even more questionable. In the evening, Roddy and Kardashian had been walking on the forest path for 5 hours. Because they were well prepared and had brought a rotation of horses, their journey was basically unimpeded. In the game, the kingdom of Karen had also reached sunset. The forest at night was very dangerous, and players usually did not choose to continue their journey. Moreover, the accounts used by Roddy and Kardashian were not considered strong. Along the way, the little female dragon had already understood her current strength, so naturally, she would not rashly advance. She took the initiative to set up camp with Roddy. After seeing the system notification of the night protection buff, the two of them went offline together. After leaving the virtual network, Kardashian, who had taken off her helmet, could not help but be in a daze. Roddy was used to this. He got up and began to prepare dinner for Kardashian. To put it bluntly, it was just boiled water and a cup of milk tea, along with the white bread mutton he bought in the village today. The furnishings in the house were very simple, but this did not prevent Kardashian from feeling the atmosphere of living a normal life. Roddy quickly prepared everything and whispered, "Sister, hurry up and eat. I'll go say hello to Grandpa Zhang, and then check on the motorcycle. I have to make sure we have a way out. Okay, don't forget to eat something." Kardashian's voice unconsciously became gentle, but when Roddy went out, her eyes were a little lost. Her gaze stopped on the game helmet. Although this dragon's appeared calm before, she was still shocked by the power of the network, and the concept of a quantum computer was closer to that of a god. Which dragons could imagine that a man-made object could simulate a world? If she told these things to her father, Victor, she would definitely be criticized as absurd, but everything in front of her was the reality that Roddy had experienced. Kardashian had unknowingly had a change in her view. Originally, her view of humans was indeed ants, and the best of them, such as King Duke, or those who worked hard to become a high-level magister, were only barely qualified to talk to her. But now, she understood the result of the explosion of human technology after the increase of productivity. This was only the general sense of a level 0.7 civilization. After understanding most of the current theories in this world and having a general understanding of the entire human civilization, she then knew that there were higher levels of 2 and 3 civilizations in this universe. How powerful would the civilization that could directly use the energy of stars and even the energy of the Milky Way be? There were no real gods in the world that Kardashian lived in. Demigod, which was the level of her father, Victor, was already the limit of existence that she could come into contact with. Because she had seen so many, she habitually thought that she was already standing close to the top of the world. But now she understood that apart from the planet, besides the sea and the land, there was also the vast and boundless stars and the universe that was measured in light years. Standing in such a field of vision, she was afraid that she could not even be considered as an ant. No matter what the result was, this trip to the space-time prison had completely changed Kardashian's worldview, outlook on life, and values. She was in a trance for a long time, and then realized that the food was almost cold. Only then did she quickly get up to eat. 1 second she was visualizing the universe, and the next second she was back to the problem of food and clothing. This kind of difference made Kardashian smile a little bitterly, but after smiling, her heart was much more fulfilled than before. Chapter 8:25. On the other side, Roddy walked out of the house and greeted Mr. Zhang. He declined his dinner invitation with the excuse that he had already eaten. When he walked out of the yard, he found that it was still early. It would probably be dark in an hour or so. He pulled up his hood and chose the street with the least pedestrians to leave the village. After making a big circle, he trotted all the way to the place where he stored his motorcycle. In order to prevent being discovered, Fei Shuang was leaning against the mountain. He covered it with a tent that was similar in color to the sand and covered it with stones and dirt. From a distance, no one would notice it at all. Roddy specially started the motorcycle. After confirming that the battery was working properly, he turned off the engine and hid it again. Then, he walked around the village without a trace, ready to enter from the other side. He did not know that Mr. Zhang, who was taking a stroll, was chatting with a group of neighbors in the open space at the entrance of the village. Before the weather became warm, everyone liked to discuss the Zhang family's affairs here. In fact, this scene had never changed since ancient times. Whose daughter was still unmarried. Whose family gave birth to a big fat boy. Gossiping about private matters was the favorite thing for the old men and women in the village. However, with the development of the information age, these topics would occasionally become international affairs such as who will be the next president of the United States? And will North Korea attack? There were only so many people in the village. Everyone met each other all the time. So, sometimes the village secretary and other public servants would join in the discussion after work. Naturally, the few policemen from the nearby police station were no exception. Mr. Zhang, you seem to be in a good mood recently. Policeman Jiang Moluo had just been transferred here for 2 years after graduating from the police academy. This kind of grassroots job was often the best way to wear down a person's edge. The lofty ambitions he had when he graduated had been worn down to the point where he could barely breathe. Now, thanks to the overwhelming number of surveillance cameras and the rapid economic development, there were far fewer people sneaking around than a few decades ago. Therefore, there was also an advantage to being a policeman in a small village. There was more leisure time. When he was not on duty, he could just drink a bag of tea and read a novel for a day. The salary was not much. Except for the occasional study and training, there was basically nothing to worry about. After a long time, his spirit gradually became tired. Xiao Jiang was not busy recently. He had a few meetings in the morning and drank a lot of water in the afternoon. When he walked out of the police station after work, he saw Grandpa Zhang, who was taking a walk. He asked casually, intending to say hello and be polite. In his heart, he was thinking about what to eat tonight, but Grandpa Zhang's reply made him a little stunned. Didn't a backpacker come these few days? That young man is quite sensible. He chats with me every day, so of course he's in a good mood. Grandpa Zhang folded his hands behind his back. It was obvious that he was ready to tell Xiao Jiang the story. Sigh, my son is almost 40 and he only calls once a month. You see, he's just a tourist, but he knows how to accompany me to listen to my past. I know he might not like it, but at least he knows how to be polite. Uncle Zhang, do you think there are tourists passing by here? Molu Jiang became vigilant, but he still maintained a curious expression on his face. He quietly said, Where did this person come from? You have to be careful. He's from the capital. This young man is quite persistent. He said he was hiking and wanted to stay here for a few days. I didn't want to take the money, but he insisted on giving it to me. If he really had some bad intentions, why would he be so polite to me? He even bought some oil and rice for us these few days. We don't lack these things, but he's so honest. As Grandpa Zhang spoke, he seemed to notice something. Xiao Jiang, you don't mean to investigate him, do you? Investigate what? I'm already off work. From what you said, I guess there should be no problem. I was just asking out of habit just now. Please don't mind it. As he said this, he said goodbye to Grandpa Zhang and walked away leisurely. To be honest, Molu Jiang didn't intend to pay attention to this kind of thing. Grandpa Zhang was a native of the village and had hardly moved in the past 40 years. Logically speaking, he didn't need to care about this kind of thing, but he suddenly stopped, and an emotion called suspicion inexplicably gushed out from his heart. Finally, Molu Jiang looked back at Grandpa Zhang, who had already strolled towards the square. He turned around and returned to the police station. He said to another colleague who had not left, Gang Zi, let's go and check the household. Roddy calmly turned from an alley to the yard of Grandpa Zhang's house. He was carrying a bag of corn in his hand, which he bought for Grandpa Zhang's family. But when he raised his head and saw the two figures in police uniforms in front of the courtyard gate, his body suddenly tensed up. When he was a civilian, he wouldn't have any superfluous thoughts when he saw the police. But after he had a guilty conscience, the navy blue uniform and the police badge were like flashing red lights, making his hair stand on end. Roddy felt a moment of confusion in his mind, but he calmly suppressed it. This was a prison of time and space. Thanks to Kardashian's warning, Roddy would not easily fall into the trap of this world. When the two of them looked at him, Roddy immediately relaxed his body and put on a stunned expression. He walked closer and said, "Officers, what's the matter?" Molu Jiang deliberately chose the time when Grandpa Zhang had not returned to bring Gangzi over. At this moment, when he saw Roddy, he basically confirmed that the other party was the backpacker from the capital. Police officers were used to observing other people's expressions, but the guy in front of them did not seem to be flustered. His eyes were calm and his footsteps were not hurried. He walked to the front and waved the corn in his hand. "I came from the imperial capital on foot. Uncle Zhang seems to have gone out. Is there anything I can help you with?" The two officers didn't think that this person was a vicious criminal because of his fluent imperial capital accent and peaceful attitude. The main reason was that in their eyes, Roddy was just an honest young man. However, they still had to go through the necessary procedures. Molu Jiang took a step forward and waved the black machine in his hand. "Oh, I heard from Uncle Zhang that you are from the imperial capital. We need to see your ID card for this routine inspection. Please cooperate." Police officers had never been particularly polite when they spoke. Although Gangzi usually looked lazy, he had already taken a step to the side. This was obviously to prepare for an emergency. Roddy knew that the black machine was used to detect whether the holder of the ID card was wanted. He had already been on the task force's list. Needless to say, if he took out his ID card, it would definitely be pressed. He felt his heart beat faster, not because he was afraid of being arrested, but because he was thinking about what kind of weapon the other party was carrying. He did not even dare to think about assaulting a police officer in the past, but now he did not even hesitate. With a sincere face, he said, "Oh, I didn't bring my ID card with me. It's in the house." As he spoke, he walked to the yard and continued, "Wait a minute, I'll open the door and go in to get it." The door lock of this house was an ordinary aluminum alloy door. Roddy took the key and twisted it twice. The keyhole made a noise and he smiled bitterly and said, "This door is not easy to open." Up to this point, Roddy's performance had been very normal. Behind him, would Clog and Gangzi unconsciously let down their guard. Roddy did not deliberately delay. On the fourth try, he turned the door lock with a click. He calmly turned the handle, pushed the door open, and entered. He put the key aside, turned around and said, "It's quite cold outside. Please come in and have a seat." This request was not surprising. After all, it was already dark, and the temperature outside was only a little higher than 0. Usually, when checking the ID card, there was no need to enter the house. However, Woodclog knew that he could not let the other party out of his sight, so he did not hesitate and followed them into the house. In Inner Mongolia, some farmers had controlled weapons in their homes. He did not want any accidents to happen. Gongzi also knew this, so he followed them into the house. When the light was turned on, Roddy walked to the bed and rummaged through his bag. As a result, Woodclog saw 2 sets of game helmets on the bed. His face changed and he said, "Gongzi, something's wrong." Chapter 8:26. The power of the baton was not great. It could not be compared with a machete or a spear. But in a narrow space, it was quite effective. Woodclog instinctively raised his arm to block, but he was hit on the bone with a "paw" sound. Listening to the sound, it was at least a bone fracture. His forehead was sweating from the pain, but he still remembered the movements he had practiced. He immediately stabilized his body and prepared to fight back. Gongzi, who was behind him, immediately knew that someone was behind him. As a result, when he turned around, he saw a figure had already rushed in front of him. The speed of the hand knife was so fast that it was like a shadow. He tried to raise his arm to block, but his vision went black and he fell to the ground. Woodclog, who was alone, heard Gongzi's muffled groan. He immediately retreated to the side and reached out to press the walkie-talkie hanging on his chest. But he had only taken 2 steps when he was tripped by Kardashian, who had caught up with him. He lost his balance and hit his head on the wardrobe. Everything happened in a flash. When Roddy saw the other party's posture, he knew that this guy intended to inform other colleagues through the walkie-talkie, so he gritted his teeth and endured the pain in his hip bone and rushed forward. There was no order to this fight. Woodclog desperately kicked away Roddy. When he finally grabbed the walkie-talkie, before he had time to speak, he saw Kardashian, who was next to him, slap his hand directly. "Paw!" Woodclog's whole hand was in pain. He looked down and was shocked to find that the walkie-talkie he was holding was directly broken. He looked up, and the beauty with dragon horns in front of him had already lifted her foot. The next moment, his consciousness fell into darkness. Roddy breathed heavily. There were 2 footprints on his body. He sat on the ground in pain and could not get up. Kardashian seemed to be in good condition. She glanced out of the window vigilantly, walked quickly to the door, and locked the door. Then she turned back and whispered, "What happened?" In fact, there was a tacit understanding between the two. Roddy's actions and words outside the door were deliberately reminding her. Kardashian immediately realized that this guy was in trouble, so she hid behind the door without saying a word. What happened next was naturally within her expectations. She didn't care who the 2 people in front of her were. In short, she just needed to get rid of anyone who could threaten her. Are we going to kill him? She did not care about the lives of the people in the time-space prison, but Roddy shook his head. It's true that the later they are found, the better. But their profession is special. If they die, it may lead to the deployment of professional troops to track us down. At that time, there will be less room for negotiation. This was a very realistic problem. Although he knew that everything was an illusion, understanding the rules here would often save him a lot of trouble. The members of Team J who had come out for patrol did not return. They would definitely come out to investigate tomorrow, so there was not much difference between killing them and tying them up. At most, they could only delay them for a day. It seems like we don't have much time left. Roddy thought of the concept of heavenly Tao again. He was even more certain that this was a net that was getting tighter and tighter. With his current ability, he was afraid that no matter how hard he struggled, he would be in a predicament with nowhere to escape. So the only way was to find the key to escape from the time-space prison. In the end, the walkie-talkie did not send out any signal. This gave Roddy a chance to breathe. He thought for a moment and immediately said, "Pack up, we'll leave in a while. First, tie these two up. Even if they wake up, they won't be able to notify anyone. Later, I'll go out to buy some things. We can't stay in the village anymore." Kardashian did not ask anything and immediately began to drag the two lying on the ground to the side. Kardashian had used too much force, so the two would probably be unconscious for a long time. But what Roddy needed now was time, so he not only tied the two up and stuffed a rag in their mouths, but also found a rope to tie them in two corners of the house. Roddy knew that people could still make noise even if their mouths were stuffed. In order to avoid attracting the attention of Uncle Zhang next door, he turned on the computer's sound system and played a rock music with the lead singer's roar. After turning on the loop list, he went out of the house. On the way, he happened to meet Uncle Zhang, who was returning home. He said, "Uncle, my computer's sound system won't disturb you, right?" "No, it won't. This house is quite soundproof." After hearing this, Roddy was relieved. After chatting for a while, he ran to the restaurant in the village that was not closed. He bought 2 bags of dry food and jerky. After returning to the yard with them, he deliberately left the door unlocked. He and Kardashian patiently waited for Uncle Zhang to sleep. At 9:30 in the evening, the two quietly left the yard. With the bought dry food and 2 game helmets, they found the motorcycle. Because the game helmets took up space, Roddy had to hang a net bag on the side, and then quickly drove into the distance. As for where they were going, Roddy had no plan in mind. At this time, the two of them cooperated more tacitly than before. Kardashian reached out and hugged Roddy's waist. Only the sound of the tires and engine could be heard. She relaxed her body and pressed her chest against Roddy's back. Everything was so natural. The car itself still had a quarter of the fuel left. Roddy walked along the asphalt road for a while. When he saw a surveillance camera, he ran to the dirt road and drove. But when he saw a road checkpoint with flashing lights in the distance, he still turned to the wilderness road and moved forward on the bumpy wilderness. At 12 o'clock in the morning, they had already traveled more than 100 kilometers. The night was cold, and the two of them had to camp in the barren land of Inner Mongolia. There was no sandstorm today, and the Milky Way above their heads was clear and bright. But the two of them were not in the mood to be sentimental, because they both felt an unprecedented urgency. "Sister, if you could find yourself in the game, what would you do?" Riding a motorcycle was not like driving a car. Riding for a few hours on the cross-country road would consume as much energy as running 20 kilometers. In order to ensure the calories, Roddy specially heated up 2 cakes to eat. There were no villages in sight, only the starry sky that stretched to the horizon. It was as if the two of them were the only ones left in the world. "To be honest, I haven't thought about it yet." Kardashian held a cup of boiling water in her hand and answered after a moment of silence. But this answer was not surprising to Roddy. If he were to face the other him, he would probably also be a little confused. But now there was only one way. Time was tight, and if they could find clues, perhaps the key to escape from the prison was here. The night was cold, and the two of them ate in the tent. After tidying up, the two of them did not directly sleep like before. Instead, they kept watch at night separately. Occasionally, the wind that blew past made the tent rustle. Roddy put the baton beside him and used the motorcycle as a wall to block the wind. He silently looked at the wilderness under the moonlight, but in his heart, he was thinking about the way out. After changing shifts, Roddy slept for 3 hours and continued his journey in the early hours of the morning with dark circles under his eyes. He was quite lucky and soon found a village. As usual, he parked the motorcycle far away and entered the village carefully. After spending a lot of time and money, he finally bought 2 5G cards that could access the internet and a watch that could turn on a hotspot in a simple mobile business hall. Although this type of card required a real name, it was not a problem as long as he paid enough money. Returning to the motorcycle, Roddy continued to ride toward the sparsely populated mountainside. He found a dirt slope that could still receive signal. After covering the motorcycle with sand, the two of them ate some simple dry food. While eating, Roddy opened his watch to search for news and found that the news of 2 policemen attacked had already appeared. He did not dare to log into his Weibo account. After logging in, he saw that this news had become the #1 trending topic on Weibo. Every post that was forwarded had his information and profile picture. Kardashian was also on the wanted list, but because he could not find any information, he could only say that she was a foreigner and posted a screenshot of the video taken in the archery pavilion. He knew that the search for him must have escalated, and now everything had to be sped up. Let's hurry up. I'm afraid we don't have much time. I don't know how long it will take for them to find this place, Roddy said as he turned on the hotspot on his phone. Lying in the tent in the wilderness, he put on the helmet. Got it. Chapter 8:27. Roddy did not know that the police's reaction speed was faster than he thought. Zhao Hongwen had been completely obsessed these days. He did his best to mobilize all the forces he could. In the end, the task force, which was originally just an ordinary task force, had to set a political goal of solving the case within a week, because of the frequent pressure from the higher-ups. After learning that Roddy might have fled to Inner Mongolia, the task force actually had an unusual headache. There were too many things to coordinate when handling a cross-provincial case, and it was also very troublesome to mobilize resources and manpower. But with Zhao Hongwen's crazy efforts, the task force found that the entire investigation and reconnaissance process had become smooth. Of course, they didn't know that Zhao Hongwen had almost overdrawn all his political resources to investigate this case. It was so exaggerated that he had people greeting everyone from the deputy S-class to the mayor. This kind of power even made Zhao Hongwen's father and the old man at home feel dissatisfied. But it was undeniable that the Inner Mongolia police quickly got clues from Wooden Clog, who had just woken up. After finding the village where Roddy had been hiding, the scope of the investigation began to rapidly narrow down. After that, the clues of Roddy's purchase of the 5G phone card were also found. After that, it was even simpler. Through the state machine, they found the place where the signals of these 2 cards were emitted. The current location of Roddy's location was no longer a secret. Combined with the previous risk assessment of Roddy and Kardashian, the task force determined that these 2 people committed a serious crime and are extremely dangerous. Originally, only 4 police cars were needed to arrest them, but because of Zhao Hongwen's influence, the special police were finally dispatched. 2 special explosion-proof vehicles and 4 Mitsubishi Pajeros, automatic weapons, and snipers set off together. People who did not know the situation would think that they were going to the border to fight with drug dealers. After hearing the news, Zhao Hongwen's face was full of a morbid smile. On the other side, Knight, who had locked onto the 2 accounts of Sleepy Fox and Europe Rheinhaken through the quantum computer, had already set off from the imperial capital. He did not go to the capital airport. Instead, he arrived at Nanyuan Airport in the south of Beijing by car. From there, he took a temporary flight to Baotou. He continued to issue orders on the plane to urgently transfer the helicopter of a high-class hospital invested by C Company in Beijing to temporarily fly to Baotou. This series of actions was very sudden and very secretive. Almost no one realized that Sir's actions had anything to do with Roddy, who was about to be arrested. The official announcement was nothing more than Baotou City Hospital needs an emergency helicopter transfer, and Knight will visit Baotou City or discuss investment direction. Show me the data. Only the flight crew, Jazz, and his accompanying bodyguards and assistants were on the plane. The entire first-class cabin was off-limits to flight attendants. At this moment, Sir was connecting the quantum communication satellite launched by his company to the quantum server in London to check all the abnormal data in the past 2 days. Previously, the server seemed to have stopped after the attack, but the quantum server detected another form of attack that affected the players' thinking in the game. Although current technology was unable to deconstruct the human brain, let alone completely dissect the human mind, the supercomputing power allowed the quantum server to simultaneously monitor the player's physical condition with the help of the game helmet/cockpit sensors. Needless to say, this was definitely illegal. But because there was no second quantum computer of the same level in the world, no one had realized this until now. This secret also involved the research project of the Consciousness Separation Research Department. However, at this moment, the list of affected players displayed manic symptoms. When the information on this list was listed, Sir squinted his eyes and looked at it. He then said to the AI assistant, "Show me their current map location." The 3D hologram displayed the game map of Earthbreaker. After quickly zooming in, the light dots representing these players were actually in the same area. Obviously, they were tracking and surrounding the other 2 icons on the map. Sir casually tapped on them and discovered the IDs displayed were Sleepy Fox and European Emperor Reinhaken. So, the problem is still here. When Ye Yen opened his eyes, the mottled sunlight between the trees proved that the weather in the game was pretty good. Roddy stood up from his camp in the forest and glanced at the status bar. He first opened the external senses option because he needed to constantly pay attention to movements outside the game. After adjusting it, the bonfire state countdown timer in the game showed that there were still 10 seconds left. This state was to protect players in the wilderness. After all, although the quantum server could guarantee the smooth flow of the game, the bandwidth of each player's connection to the network was different. Some people would have to wait a few seconds before they could take action because of the lag. Being in a city, the probability of being attacked was very low, so there was a 5-second protection state. However, the dangers in the wilderness were high. In order to prevent unknown dangers from occurring, the players were currently in the bonfire state, where they could not be attacked for 10 seconds. However, this was also known as the stealth state by the players. In this state, other players and monsters were unable to observe Roddy and Kardashian, but they could see others. This allowed the players to prepare for a short period of time. However, during this time, apart from chatting, they couldn't move or cast any spells. However, once they confirmed that everything was fine, they could cancel this state and immediately take action. Before they went offline, Roddy and Kardashian were in a party so they could see each other. Kardashian, who was wearing a magic robe, was holding a magic staff and looking around. Roddy wanted to say something, but the movements around him made him immediately alert. Both of them frowned as they looked around. There were more than 5 adventurers standing within a 20-meter radius, glancing at them from time to time. As a PvP player with many years of experience, Roddy immediately realized that someone was lying in wait for him. After the players went offline, a tent would be displayed at their original location, but the identity of the person in the tent would not be revealed even if they got closer. However, this did not stop some people from lying in wait after following them. Earthbreaker was a world with a high degree of freedom. Players killing each other could even be considered the main theme. Being killed by a lying in wait was one of the most common ways to die. Even Roddy himself had lying in wait for quite a number of people, but he obviously did not expect to be ambushed in such a situation. There were 5 people in front of him. Who knew how many more were hiding in the bushes in the distance? Going offline at this time? It was obvious that Roddy and Kardashian had no chance in this situation. So his decision was simple. "Sister, we have to kill our way out." Kardashian was not surprised at all. She frowned slightly and narrowed her eyes. "What do we need to be careful of?" "Be careful of hidden arrows. "Sister, go to the right side and look for cover behind the tree. I'll use my bow and arrow to suppress them. Then, go to the left side. If there are too many of them, focus on crowd control. If there are too few of them, kill them all before leaving." As he spoke, there were only 2 seconds left on the countdown timer for the bonfire state. Rhodey glanced at it and raised the short bow in his hand. He aimed directly at the thief, who was holding the crossbow about 30 meters away. Twang! The sound of the bowstring vibrating could be heard. The bandit who was standing there was instantly struck in the eye by an arrow. He grunted and fell to the ground, dead. Not far away, a defense warrior called Condemnation Proud Heaven was shocked and immediately shouted, "They're out!" But before he could finish, an arrow shot into his mouth and penetrated his head. Even though he was wearing plate armor and holding a round shield, this defense warrior was still a little careless. Before he came here, he was told that the enemies were a swordsman and an elementalist. Elementalists had a slow casting speed, and swordsmen could not attack from afar. So, he took off his helmet that had poor vision and heat. Chapter 828. Roddy's bow's damage was not high. After all, it was an excellent grade equipment that he had bought in town, and its usage level was only level 12. But no matter how low the damage was, it could not withstand a critical hit from a vital point. After killing the 2 players, Roddy did not stop and began to run. As expected, an arrow suddenly flew past him. Roddy heard the sound of the arrow nailing into a tree trunk and could basically tell that it was an advanced ranger who shot it. It was not realistic to shoot the arrow head-on, so he rolled forward and hid in the blind spot behind the tree. But he did not dare to wait. Exploding arrows and guided arrows could pose a threat to him. So he immediately stood up from the other side and prepared to shoot. But when he raised his bow, he found that the enemy had been hit by Kardashian's frost arrow, and the tree behind him was cut off on the spot. Roddy did not dare to be careless. He raised his bow and aimed at the other side. Then he saw that the few people who were facing Kardashian just now had their heads pierced by the frost arrow. The combat power of a level 4 elementalist was far from that strong, but Kardashian relied on her amazing spellcasting skills to directly crush the few amateur players. These few players who were camping were obviously not professional. Roddy took a look at them and found that they were all wearing the Heart of the Fire Feather Guild badge. They should have monitored us in this area, so they sent a lot of teams to keep an eye on the camp. Roddy immediately deduced the general situation. Fortunately, there are many players in this area, and their manpower is scattered. Otherwise, we would not be able to run even if there were dozens of them. But now, I'm afraid that the problem is even bigger. Kardashian frowned. At this moment, she suddenly regretted having a conflict with this group of people. Although they had killed the players who were camping, it meant that the group of people who came to kill them knew their position, and soon more people would surround them. However, although Kardashian was hot-tempered, she was also reasonable. She knew that there was no point in regretting now, so she immediately said, "We'll be able to enter the mountain area soon. Let's rush out first." Roddy had the same thought. He didn't even bother to pack up his tent. Instead, he leaped onto the horse that was displayed when he logged on. He hung his bow bag on the side and quickly set off with Kardashian on the road to their destination. Both of them knew that entering the McGrath mountain range did not mean that the problem was solved. Instead, it was the beginning of the problem. After all, no one could be sure that this was the key to getting out of the space-time prison. But now they had no other choice. The police were on the lookout for them outside the game, and the players in the game were on drugs, hunting them down on a large scale. Roddy now believed that this was definitely not a coincidence. On the other hand, it might be because Kieran was getting closer to the truth and the temporal prison was trying its best to stop him. The two of them no longer dared to take the main road that players often took. Now, the route they took was completely adjusted by Kardashian based on her keen intuition. Although Roddy was a technological geek, he was not strong enough to remember the distribution of monsters on the map. But Kardashian could determine the activity of magical beasts in the vicinity from the subtle fluctuations in the air and the clues on the ground. Not long after, the two of them heard movement in the forest. The members of the Fire Feather Heart Guild obviously wanted to give chase, but Roddy's arrows and Kardashian's spells were as accurate as cheats. 7 or 8 of the two teams that tried to get close were killed on the spot, and the follow-up troops were a distance away from them. As they went deeper into the forest, the road became more rugged. Riding on the horse, Kardashian could only constantly cast spells to try to clear the obstacles on the road and constantly detect whether there were any suspicious creatures hiding in the surroundings. After forcibly passing through the borders of the territories of a few magical beasts, the Fire Feather Heart Guild could not hear any movement for a while. Roddy could not be sure if the other party would risk provoking powerful magical beasts to continue the chase. He glanced at the map and found that the two of them were now in the McRath mountain range, and the road under their feet was starting to become uphill. The exhausted horse finally could not run anymore. Roddy and Kardashian could only dismount and walk. Time was really precious, and they did not even have the time to stop and rest. Kardashian's efficiency in clearing the road was many times better than Machete's, and the two of them did not slow down. Along the way, they encountered a magical beast that took the initiative to attack them 3 times, but they were quickly dealt with. After walking for a while, Roddy finally became impatient and asked in a low voice, "Sis, where are we going?" Kardashian did not have an answer to this question. "I can only think about where I would be if I were to be on duty here." But as they walked, she suddenly asked, "You said before that there are no spells on Earth?" "I don't know if there were in the past, but there are indeed no so-called magicians now. People do not have the ability to control the elements, nor do they know how to cast fireballs." Roddy did not know why she asked this and replied casually, "Then why is the feeling of condensing elements so real in the game? If the person who designed the game is not an elementalist, how does he judge this?" Kardashian did not think of this problem when she was in conflict with the Fire Feather Heart Guild yesterday because she was busy dealing with all the enemies. However, the continuous casting of spells during the journey today finally made her realize that this seemingly normal place was actually abnormal. After a series of battles, she found that she could really feel the headache when her mana was close to being depleted, which was why she asked this question. Roddy was a little dumbfounded after hearing this. After all, no one in this world knew what it felt like to truly condense elements. And he himself had never cast spells like an elementalist in the game because the Ranger and Berserker classes did not have mana. Casting normal scrolls would not bring about any additional feelings, or rather, he had never thought about it in that direction. This feeling was extremely mysterious. Perhaps the experienced Earthbreaker players would have experienced it, but what was the point of saying it? First, it could not increase their strength, and second, it might be seen as a lunatic. However, when a real dragon said this, Roddy immediately felt a chill down his spine. Who was the person behind the game company? How did they know what it felt like to sense elements? Could it be that someone really knew magic? Or could it be that the person who created this game, he had always held the idea that Earthbreaker was a virtual world and Earth was the real world? But now Roddy was finally a little shaken. As he was thinking, a loud roar of a magical beast came from afar. The two of them turned around and looked at each other. Obviously, Roddy and Kardashian did not think that the people who were chasing them at this time just happened to be killing magical beasts for a mission they're catching up. When Roddy said this, he felt a little helpless. At first, he thought that as long as the people from the other guild were normal, they would probably choose to give up after chasing them here. There were many magical beasts in the mountains, and the path was difficult to traverse. If they were to rush in blindly, they could be wiped out by the powerful magical beast. But now it was obvious that the other party was determined to not give up until they were dead. Even in the game, they still have to be so aggressive, Kardashian could not help but complain. She had already confirmed that this group of people were definitely normal players. If there was a grudge, it would only be because of the players who were killed. Now that a guild had mobilized so many people to kill them, how could there be no problems? Roddy's mind was inexplicably reminded of the zombies in the zombie movies. However, he was not interested in what these players were thinking. He only wanted to know how much longer he had to go before he could see the light of day. The two of them sped up, and in the end, they could not stop themselves from panting. When the sky was about to turn dark, Kardashian suddenly raised her hand. "Wait!" Roddy put his hands on his knees and raised his head. In front of him was still an endless forest. He could not see any difference from before. He looked at Kardashian with a puzzled expression. She was currently looking in front of her, seemingly pondering something. In the end, she raised her wand and cast a spell at the ground in front of them. Roddy glanced at the battle window. It only said, "Your party member, Sleepy Fox, is currently casting a spell." There was no other notification. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.